Good morning and welcome to the fifth meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Commerce and Labor. We'll call the roll first. So for those members attending virtually, would you please make sure that your cameras are on at all times and make sure that you respond when your name, when your name is called. Ms. Rowe, please call the roll.
Senator Lang. Senator Stone. Assemblywoman Backus. Present. Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Present.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres. Chair Spearman.
Here. And I don't think that Assemblywoman Torres is going to be able to join us today at school, but thank you all for accommodating us. I was not really sure whether or not the new building would be open, and I didn't want to make a decision like we'll be here and then we'll be there. And so this was a safe place. And it's a pretty comfortable room, too. It's not brand new, but it's a pretty comfortable room, too. So thank you. Thank you. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping first for those of you who have your telephone. And if you have a computer that sings to you, if you'll do me a favor and just turn the volume down to make sure that it doesn't make any noises while we are in meeting. The committee's meeting materials can be found on the Nevada Legislature website, and you can also sign up for the electronic notifications related to any activity on the committee's website. If you wish to testify in person, please sign in at the table by the door and leave a business card. If you do not testify, you may also want to sign in so that there's a record of who is interested in a particular topic in the event that the committee needs to contact you later. When testifying in person, please turn the microphones on to speak and speak directly into the microphone. I promise you that it's been defanged and it will not bite you. So please speak into the microphone, and that's really to make sure that the people who are joining us on the computer can hear us. We'll have public comment period at the beginning and the end of the meeting, and public comment is limited to 2 minutes per speaker. In addition to testifying in person, members of the public may provide public comment in 4 different methods, all of which are listed on the agenda. You can provide public comment by calling 888-475-4499. That's 888-475-4499. Then enter the meeting ID, which is 842-9675-1534, and press pound. You can email comments to clinterim@lcbstate.nv.us. Mail written comments, you can do that, send it to 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada, 89701, or you can fax 775-684-6400. You can find the phone and fax numbers, email address, and all mailing addresses on the agenda. And with that, we will move forward with public comment. Anyone here for public comment? Begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Interim Committee. My name is Donna Zanetti. I'm an attorney with Leach, Kern, Gruco, Song, and we represent homeowners associations across Nevada, many of which are struggling with property insurance costs. To provide a single example, in 2024, a townhome condo community's entire insurance budget was about $115,000. In the spring, the association's insurance company notified the board that it wouldn't renew its property insurance policy. The best policy the association could get was one for over $700,000 with a $250,000 deductible. That resulted in a special assessment of more than $4,600 per unit. NRS requires HOAs to insure the unit as well as the common elements, subject to reasonable deductibles and reasonable availability. But do these deductibles and these premiums seem reasonable? A $250,000 deductible is essentially self-insurance for all but a catastrophic loss. The alternative is to carry no insurance, but that's not really reasonable either. We can't force insurance companies to sell policies in this state. What we can do is amend NRS 116 to give associations more options in this type of market, such as removing the burden for insuring the units to allow for bare walls coverage and allowing the association to charge the cost of repair done as a common expense to the owners who negligently and carelessly damage their owners' units. This has been a crisis for many associations throughout this state, and the most vulnerable being condos and townhouses, because that's where first-time buyers, that's what they can afford. So hopefully the legislature in 2025 can find a way to help associations and make cost of living in condos and townhouses affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here for public comment? BPS, do we have anyone on the phone lines?
Thank you, Chair Spearman. To provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, please press star 6 to unmute. Go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
We can
Yes,
hear
please
you.
proceed.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Evelyn Teresa Leeds. I am a Las Vegas resident. I am also addressing the rising cost of home and commercial insurance rates in Nevada. As a community leader, homeowner, and realtor, I am deeply invested in our community. I believe it is crucial as a state to understand the factors driving increases to ensure we Nevadans are making informed decisions for our state. Here are my key points. Based upon a presentation given by the Vice President of APEC, I believe, who's attending this meeting, this is what I came up with. Natural catastrophes are driving rates up. Nevada has faced earthquakes, floods, droughts, and wildfires. We need to see the data on claims made from these events to clarify their impact on insurance costs. Secondly, modern homes, roughly 88% of the homes in Southern Nevada were built after 1990. Those homes are currently energy efficient and could potentially qualify for resilience designations right now. This should be a consideration in rate assessments. Commercial development. Most commercial properties have also been built post-1990. Our modern infrastructure should be considered. Underground utilities. The extent of underground utilities in Nevada can also significantly mitigate disaster damage and should be considered. Impact on home values. Rising insurance costs will deter buyers and strain current homeowners. To ensure fair and justified insurance rates for Nevadans, a data-driven approach for our state and our state alone should be considered. So to sum up, I believe our legislature should seriously consider reviewing the data on catastrophe-related claims and what APEC needs regarding their determination if we as a state can meet their standards for energy efficiency, resilience designations, and utility infrastructure. I believe that data could benefit APEC's determination of what is fair and affordable for premium cost for the state of Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Can you restate and spell your name, please?
One moment, Chair.
My name is Evelyn Teresa Leeds. Would you like me to spell it?
Yes, please.
Evelyn is Evelyn. Teresa is Theresa. And Leeds is Leeds.
Thank you so much. BPS, do we have anyone else on the line?
Here, the public line is open and working. We have no additional callers at this time.
Okay, I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds and we'll move forward. Still no one?
Correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. Public comment, we'll close that out now. And now we're at item number 3, approval of the minutes for the meeting on May 23rd, 2024. Members of the committee, are there any questions regarding the minutes? I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes of the committee meeting on May 23rd, 2024.
So moved.
Vice Chair Marzola has made a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Second by Assemblywoman Bacchus. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Thank you so much. Item number 4, presentation on insurance issues related to wildfires. And I see that we have the insurance commissioner here. Mr. Kipper, how are you doing this morning? And we have Adam Plain, Department of Business and Industry. So we're really trying to follow up on some constituent concerns regarding rising homeowners insurance, as we've heard this morning in public comment. And I don't know about you, but I get a lot of calls regarding that. The only thing that I had not received was a call from the HOA indicating what those insurance rates were. But with that, let me turn it over to you, Commissioner Kipper.
Thank you very much, Chair Spearman and Vice Chair Marzola and members of the committee. My name is Scott Kipper. That's S-C-O-T-T. Last name is K-I-P-P-E-R, and I serve as the Insurance Commissioner for the state of Nevada. I'm joined at the table by Adam Plain. Adam is our insurance regulation liaison and works very closely with members of the legislature and is part of our leadership team that is working very hard on the issues of the impact of wildfire risk. This morning I will be addressing you about the challenges that many Nevada homeowners are now facing regarding the availability and affordability of property insurance, either as a homeowner or a unit owner of a condominium. Next slide. For the past several years, we've been seeing headlines like this more and more frequently, especially for our neighbors to the west. But certainly this is not exclusive to the issues surrounding western states in the U.S. These types of headlines are challenging all over the country. The challenges surrounding the availability and affordability of homeowners insurance is becoming a national problem. Since 2017, the estimated insured property losses due to natural catastrophes in the United States has averaged an inflation-adjusted value of $97 billion per year. This compares to an annual average of only $34 billion during the period of 2014 through 2016. These increases in losses throughout the country have impacted insurer reserves and are also creating major challenges regarding the pricing and availability of reinsurance. And again, reinsurance is simply just that. It's insurance that insurance companies buy to protect them from catastrophic losses. Further, 9 of the 10 costliest wildfires in the history of the United States have occurred since 2017. Wildfires is the peril that is most impacting property insurance for the western states. Nevada has been fortunate, and thus far we have avoided a catastrophic wildfire loss, and our homeowners insurance market has been profitable every year for the last 10 years. However, as you can see from the chart on the right, the number of Nevada wildfire incidents have been on an upwards trajectory in recent years. In spite of this profitable business in Nevada, due to the national loss trends and risk exposure, we are seeing an increase in Nevada insurance carriers that are non-renewing homeowners and condominium owners' insurance policies. Those homeowners that are not able to obtain coverage from an admitted carrier are often seeing significant increases in their premiums and are forced to go to the non-admitted carriers. When I talk about a non-admitted carrier, think Lloyd's of London or that type of insurance company. The division has little oversight on those, but we do allow those entities to operate in Nevada to address unique or strategic loss or strategic risks that may incur. To put some perspective on the risk being assumed by insurers, in 2022, the total written home insurance premiums in Nevada was nearly $824 million. One Nevada insurer has 584 homes insured in Incline Village, with a total insured value of those 584 homes of approximately $1.4 billion. That insurer's average annual Nevada's homeowners insurance profits are approximately $5 to $10 million per year. Now compare that with the $1.4 billion of exposure in one area, and you can understand the skittishness that the insurance industry has. In spite of Nevada being a profitable state for homeowners insurance, the increases in national catastrophic losses, and especially western state wildfires, is causing insurers to reduce their exposures to loss in Nevada. Now, the Nevada Division of Insurance, of course, is responsible for regulating insurance in the state. The rates for homeowners insurance are subject to review and approval of the division prior to being used by an insurance carrier. However, NRS 686B030 sub F, the division has no rate review oversight over commercial insurance policies, which includes condominiums and apartment building insurance. Obviously, the DOI, as was stated earlier, cannot force a carrier to write insurance in a specific area. And a carrier can cancel any policy under Nevada revised statutes with proper 30 to 60-day notice to the insured. Nevada insurance discrimination laws do not apply to the location of a property, so a carrier is allowed to cancel coverage in one area of the state and to have different underwriting rules for different areas in the state. The division has been hearing about potential problems in affordability and accessibility during the past 2 years. The division has performed data calls for homeowners insurance for the years 2023 and 2022, and have just completed a data call for commercial habitational risks, that being condominiums and condominiums and apartment buildings, in order to give us an accurate snapshot of the availability of insurance in our state. Our 2024 data calls reflect that approximately 90 carriers are writing home insurance policies in Nevada, and approximately 64 carriers are writing commercial habitational policies. The results of our our home insurance data calls show that there were significant changes to the number of policies canceled or non-renewed due to wildfire risk. In 2022, there were 264 policies that were adversely affected by wildfire risk. In 2023, this number increased to 481, which is a change of 82.2%. There are also significant changes in the number of applications that were not accepted due to wildfire risk. In 22, there were 2,439 applications that were declined due to wildfire risk. In 23, this number increased to 4,994, which is a change of 104%. Of the 481 policies non-renewed in 23 due to this wildfire risk, 261 were located in Washoe County, 69 in Douglas County, interestingly enough, 54 in Clark County, and 50 in Elko County. In 2024, the division was notified by 2 carriers of their plans to non-renew a total of 4,892 homeowners policies due to wildfire risks. So as you can see, the trends here are starting to get a little bit more alarming. And this map that you have in front of you now shows the location of the homes that were being impacted by underwriting due to wildfire risks. As you can see, most of that is in the Lake Tahoe Basin and also along the I-80 corridor. But interestingly, as I said, there's also some in Clark County, which is a little bit surprising to us. On the sides of the map, you'll see the numbers and locations of the homes that are being canceled in 2024. Northern Nevada has 4,731, and Southern Nevada has 161 homes being canceled or non-renewed. The rapid escalation of Nevada home insurance cancellations is an extremely concerning development for our residents and certainly for the division. I want to talk a little bit about commercial habitational and the findings from our most recent data call. The division also finished a recent call for carriers covering condominiums and apartment buildings, as we have heard from many Northern Nevada condominium owners about dramatic increases in their association policy premiums and assessments. We found that there are 64 carriers writing in Nevada with a total of 19,315 policies in force. However, we did find some very concerning trends in some of these forested areas. In Incline Village, of the 64 carriers that were writing business, only 19 of those were covering apartments and condominiums, which is down from 21 in 23. In State Line, the number of insurers was down from 18 down to 14. And 17 of the 83 policies covering risks located in State Line were non-renewed due to wildfire risks. When insurance through an admitted carrier cannot be found, insurance is placed with surplus lines or not admitted carriers that are not regulated closely by the division. And I say closely because these carriers still provide and pay premium taxes like any other carrier, but the contents, the design of their policies, and certainly the pricing of those policies is not a thing that the division has oversight of. These premiums can often be multiple times higher in costs. Our surplus lines data call showed that 2,528 homes in Nevada were insured with non-admitted carriers in 2023. So what is being done by the division, and what can we do? Since the first of the year, the division's executive leadership team has been meeting twice weekly on these issues. Here's some things that we have accomplished during this time. Certainly, we've had these data calls, which I just referenced. We've had several meetings with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, Center for Insurance and Insurance Policy and Research, trying to get a better handle on this in studying catastrophe and risk scoring models. Plus, we are obtaining information on other states' insurers of last resort in anticipation that such an insurer of last resort needs to be developed here in Nevada. The division has also met with NV Energy to discuss their fire mitigation plans. During that meeting, they indicated that they plan to invest close to $1 billion over the next 10 years in fire mitigation. There was a wildfire mitigation symposium in late 2022, including the panelists that you see, which was an outstanding panel of experts from across the country, and knew a great deal. And I'd like to point out that in that panel was also Casey, who's the Nevada State Forester and Fire Warden. Late last month, the division held a town hall meeting in Incline Village to hear from impacted property owners. And certainly we heard a great deal from not only homeowners, but also from condominium residents as to the challenges that they face when it comes to the increased costs and accessibility for insurance. Division staff also attended a wildfire risk forum. This was hosted by the National Interagency Fire Center, which is based in Boise, Idaho. One of the sponsoring entities was the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS. IBHS is a pioneer in this country, doing a great deal of research and performing a lot of science on what happens when wildfires take place, how they spread, and what happens when you properly mitigate properties. The division is also proposing Regulation 175-24, and this would expand requirements for the division to review and approve carrier predictive model filings. If you recall, I did mention the catastrophe models as well as risk scoring models. Catastrophe model is being developed and is relatively new for wildfires, but these catastrophe models birthed in the Gulf Coast, trying to predict what happens during hurricanes, what happens to, if a Cat 2 versus a Cat 3 storm would hit the Mississippi coast, what would happen? What would happen if a Cat 4 storm impacted the Florida coast? How far inland? What would happen to those properties? The risk scoring model is more individual homeowners, or as we would call them, individual perils, so that an insurance company would use a risk scoring model to look at a specific property, identify whether or not the property owner had performed mitigation, what risks were there. In other words, if there's juniper trees right up next to the house, are there screens over the vents? Are the eaves covered? Do you have a metal roof versus a shake roof? Those types of information go into this risk scoring model and spits out a number, and the company uses that number to assist them in setting that particular premium for that property. Also, under 17-24, we're considering a filing to be unfairly discriminatory if it does not include the use of Nevada Personal Lines Property Insurance Wildfire Mitigation Incentive Program. This is a voluntary program that was created a couple of years ago. Currently, there is no evidence that carriers are giving homeowners any kind of mitigation discounts in the state. Additionally, the division recently issued Bulletin 24-001 to provide guidance to insurers on the use of artificial intelligence systems to ensure that there is a non-discriminatory outcome. And I wanted to point out that this is not just for wildfire risks, but all use of artificial intelligence in the insurance industry as it comes to underwriting, particularly, and rate setting. We have developed homeowners insurance and commercial habitational shopping tools that are now on the division website to help Nevada consumers locate carriers that are expected to be offering coverage in that zip code. The way these work, if you go to our website, access the shopping tool, enter your zip code, you will be presented with a list of carriers that have indicated that they are writing in that particular zip code. And just this week, we've also added a similar tool for commercial habitational. And this is all based on information that we've received from the data calls that we've done. One of the great inefficiencies in insurance is the ability to shop for coverage. Insurance may only be purchased through a producer that is appointed with a particular carrier. In other words, I want to go to Acme Insurance Company. I have to deal with a producer that Acme has a contractual relationship with. Many of the top writing insurers in Nevada's property insurance markets are only offered through exclusive agents. Not to pick on State Farm, but they're an easy example. Most State Farm producers only write State Farm products. So we consider that a captive insurer or a captive agency type of setup. So insurance shopping must be extensive to obtain quotes from all carriers that are open to writing business in particular areas. We are encouraging consumers to not only deal with their agent of record already, but if they cannot get a satisfactory quote, to reach out to other brokers or to insure a captive agency type of insurers in order to get a quote that will provide them insurance. Now, our shopping tools allow consumers to put, as I said, put their zip codes in and be redirected to all of the carriers that have indicated they are open to receive applications at the time of our data call. One of the downsides of this is that we are hearing from consumers that some carriers are not taking into consideration all of the applications that they're receiving. They are being a little bit more discreet. One of the points I made earlier is the concentration of carriers. We go back to that example of the 584 policyholders of one company in Incline Village. They believe that they have too much concentration in that area, and in the event of a conflagration or a catastrophe, would have a significant impact to their bottom line. So they are trying to kind of purge their books a little bit, even though Nevada is a profitable state, of that level of concentration to avoid that catastrophic loss. Although there are no easy or complete answers to the options that can be utilized here to provide relief to Nevada property owners, some of the programs that either other states currently employ or that are being studied by the division or the other states and or the federal government are Nevada insurance insurer of last resort, known as a FAIR plan. This is a high-risk pool, a FAIR plan is a plan operated by either the state or a state-based entity that would develop an insurance program so that if a consumer does not have any other viable options, that they can turn to the FAIR plan, and that the FAIR plan would be required to provide insurance. Two challenges one significant challenge to that is going to be what that cost of that product would be. And anytime we get into a situation like this where there's a guarantee to be issued, you're looking at significant affordability challenges. Two, a high-risk pool that requires property and casualty insurance to participate in this risk. And it would also include a wildfire mitigation assistance program. Now, some states have allocated funds to help consumers fire harden their homes. I am very familiar with a program in the state of Alabama where they have gotten grant funds and some state money, and they are providing up to $10,000 to per approved applicant to take the steps to harden their homes against the threat of hurricanes. And this is something that we've discussed thoroughly with my peers across the country and is starting to find a little momentum in a number of other states. A program of reinsurance to help subsidize the risks of wildfire losses. Representative Schiff from California has introduced a bill in Congress to create a national reinsurance program to cap the exposure of insurance carriers. Nevada has had conversations with commissioners from other states about the potential for a multi-state reinsurance program. This is a program that would be completely unique. We are terribly bullish on this issue. The way that this reinsurance program would work would be that we would, in order to diversify and spread the risk, this reinsurance program would include a number of other states. We've had conversation with insurance commissioners from as far away as Alaska, New Mexico, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, states that are similarly situated to Nevada, where we could spread this risk and create a reinsurance program so that the costs would be diverse, and due to that diversity, perhaps those costs of reinsurance wouldn't be as high as they normally would be if we were just reinsuring a program here in the state of Nevada. The most commonly used tool to help consumers with insurance challenges is a state fair plan. And I want to get into a little bit of detail there. This, again, is an insurer of last resort where no other coverage is available. Currently, 32 states have fair plans, and that includes the Gulf Coast as well as our neighbors here in the West. Because of the availability crisis in California, they currently have over 250,000 properties insured through the state's plan. These plans are normally administered through a nonprofit association and a board. Carrier assessments to create the necessary reserves are either passed on to policyholders or carrier credits are allowed to be offset against premium tax payments to the state. Capitalization costs for this type of program will be significant. Most states limit dwelling coverage to $750,000 per home and $5 million for commercial properties. Although recently the California Fair Plan raised their limits to allow for $3 million per dwelling and $20 million for commercial risks. To put that in a little perspective, there are a number of units in just an incline where those insurable value of a condominium unit is upwards of $30 to $50 million. So that $20 million, where it does cover a significant portion, does not come close to covering the entire level of the insurable value. Some of the challenges we will encounter here in Nevada with the FAIR Plan is obviously first a lack of risk diversification. The wildfire risk is concentrated, if you go back to that map, to a very small number of areas, mostly in northern Nevada. We have high-valued homes in forested areas where available coverage will be inadequate. There's going to be a significant challenge to access sufficient reinsurance. And by the way, the division has had initial conversations with reinsurers from around the world to see if there would be an appetite or if they have ideas as to how we can address this problem. Again, these are very, very preliminary, but we have had those conversations. That the limits, as we just talked about, are not going to be adequate to cover most condominium or apartment risks. And then the cost to capitalize the FAIR Plan and whether or not that will be an impediment to the development of the plan. Next steps. The division is looking at getting a work program pulled together and requested and approved to move forward with an RFQ to hire an actuarial firm to perform a feasibility study for a Nevada Fair Plan. Once we get that feasibility study complete, we will deliver those results of the study and provide recommendations to both the governor and the legislature. Again, those were the significant comments that we've had. And again, this is a body of work that we have been very, very focused on over the course of the last 8 to 9 months. We have, again, been meeting regularly, and we have talked to everybody that would be associated with this, anyone from consumers to legislators to insurers, reinsurers, fire chiefs, fire professionals, our colleagues certainly from around the country, and just wanted to make sure the committee understood the level of work that is ongoing at the division, and we hope that we can come up with a viable solution or set of solutions for the state. One thing that we've been very cautious about is a bad decision has 100 orphans. We do not want to replicate bad decisions that some of our colleagues in the country have done. The FAIR Plan in Florida is extremely challenged. They're covering nearly half of the risks that are common to the hurricane peril across the state. I was as deputy commissioner in Louisiana in the aftermath of Katrina, and the challenge is getting insurance companies to come in and write those perils below I-10 in the aftermath of Katrina and Rita is real, and it's a challenge. We want to make sure that the way we do and proceed makes sense for Nevada, makes sense for our consumers, and makes sense for state government here. And with that, Madam Chair, we'd stand for any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you, sir. Committee members, any questions? Okay, Assemblywoman Bacchus.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I have a couple questions, but my first question that I have is I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly, Commissioner Kipper. With respect to the commercial lines, did you say the division actually does not have oversight authority to be looking at the actual risk being taken on by the commercial lines and what their profits are, as you're able to do with the homeowners lines?
Thank you, Assemblywoman, for the question. Madam Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman.
Yeah, just go direct.
Thank you so much. That is correct. We don't have a great deal of oversight of what those policy designs are. We don't have a great deal of oversight as to what the premiums that they charge for those commercial policies. Commercial policies are, one of the things we say around the office, you've seen one commercial policy, you've seen one commercial policy. They are each individual and unique, and they look in what they're looking at and what they're insuring. So to your question, that no, we do not have a great deal of oversight with those commercial policies.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I gave her the look to see if I could ask a follow-up question. With respect to that, and I just want to understand it, is it that we don't have authority under Nevada law for the oversight, or is it that commercial lines tend to be so specific and varying that it's really hard to compare each of the different policy lines that are being issued to one another?
Assemblywoman Bacchus, thank you for that question as well. The short answer is Nevada is exactly like every other state in which these commercial policies are treated almost exactly the same across the country. That is just the nature of insurance and the nature of the commercial side of things and the uniqueness of these policies. I hope that answered your question, but I'd certainly be able to clarify. Or Adam might have.
Thank you, Commissioner. For the record, Adam Plain, Nevada Division of Insurance. Assemblywoman, I think to directly hit at the question you've asked, the second part leads into the first. Because commercial policies are so unique and tailored to the specific risk, they have generally been excluded from statutory regulation. There's been a push that commercial policies, commercial buyers are thought to be sophisticated enough to have their own best interests in mind, and that the state does not need to have that statutory oversight.
Madam Chair, may I ask a different question? Then also taking a look at, I had a couple questions with some of the potential options to provide relief. One was with respect to the Wildlife Mitigation Assistance Program. It seemed, what I was hearing though, is a lot of the lines are not giving like offsets for any mitigation that's taking place. Like I know down south, I feel like our building code has changed that if you have a house of a certain size now, you have to have fire lines in your residential house, which would obviously decrease the risk of damage to the property. But if we're not seeing discounts, I mean, kind of does that, I mean, it seems to me you kind of need both or some sort of mandate on the carriers to be giving discounts if we start offering this program, or the program's kind of pointless. So I was trying to thinking that through.
Thank you for the record, Scott Kipper, and thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. The issue around mitigation is really a ticklish one. To my knowledge, there are very few states that are offering credits or offsets for the use of mitigation. I think the science is not quite fully baked, although during our visit to the IBHS presentation in Boise, it was demonstrated that individual mitigation is effective and does work. But on the same token, we also looked at videos and information coming out of the Paradise Fire, Lahaina in Hawaii, and others, where community mitigation wasn't in place or was not fully in place. And insurers look at that information and are reluctant, unless forced, to provide those credits or offsets for proper mitigation. The other challenge that insurers have is a homeowner can properly mitigate and effectively mitigate, but this is something that has to be an ongoing program individually. Now, I will say also that there are community mitigation efforts, and I want to say hats off to those in Nevada that are working hand in glove with our forestry section, as well as the fire chiefs in some of these affected areas. They've done a tremendous job of cleaning up the potential fuel on the floors in these areas. Certainly, we believe other states should look at what Nevada has done and take very good notes and follow through. We have a pretty splendid history in Nevada of not having a great many wildfire challenges. I think the worst wildfire event we've ever had claimed 41 homes. But the potential and the fact that the location is right across the street, basically from areas that have and are experiencing even today significant wildfire challenges, are enough to make the industry just a little bit nervous. And when they get nervous, they need to manage the risk, and the risk obviously is managed by things that we're seeing now in the marketplace.
I have one last question. I really do like what you're talking about the multi-state reinsurance program. It just economically made sense to me how it was explained. And I know one of the things you were looking at was to like maybe potentially request an FRQ to hire the actuarial firm to look at the Nevada Fair Plan, but that makes me nervous, but we may be there eventually by no choice if insurance carriers stop writing in the state of Nevada. But I didn't know if you guys were still planning to pursue that multi-state reinsurance program with the other states, and if that's something else you need. I don't think you would need an actual firm, but it may be something all states have to do together to see if they can decrease costs.
For the record, Scott Kipper, Insurance Commissioner, and it's a great question and great observation. The way we look at this is that the multi-state reinsurance program would work in a very integrated manner with the FAIR plan and be able to move some of that risk out of the FAIR plan and into a integrated plan that's working with other states. So they would not be apart from one another, but in fact would work in an integrated manner.
I just have one more question. Thank you, Chair. With respect to the Nevada Fair Plan, one thing I was thinking of is, I wasn't sure, but when we're looking at that, is the actual firm going to be able to give you kind of a breakdown by looking at kind of what it would cost the state for like bare, like, or the cost passed on for bare minimums, like just looking at the structure itself, like putting up backup walls, whatever is needed versus, I can't help but think of all of the improvements and other costs therein, if that would just be like another layer. But I'm assuming that's probably what they were going to do.
Again, thank you for the question, Scott Kipper, Insurance Commissioner. I think that the RFQ and working with a qualified actuary would give us a sense of what the big picture is. I mean, we mentioned that there's 534 homes of a total insured value in Incline Village of $1.4 billion. What we anticipate coming out of this study is a much broader view of the state in general, but a real focus on the impacted areas around the Tahoe Basin, Douglas County, Washoe, on up into Elko County. So it'd be, I think, a little bit higher level. One of the things you mentioned is somewhat of a coverage or policy design and what would be covered and how we would do that. I think there's the only limitation that we would have on something like that is being limited to what the imagination is of those who are designing these products. So we had a presentation yesterday from a carrier on a unique way to manage these particular risks. I think there's going to be several of these types of presentations on, you can do this, or you can tweak this, or you can have either a great big deductible or small deductible. And would that program then have the admitted carrier, the insurer on the next level, and then the next piece would go to the reinsurance and so forth. There's variations on a number of ways that these policies could be designed. And I think it's endemic upon us to study this and work with the experts in the actuarial world to come up with a way to design this product that would be both economical and as affordable as possible to Nevada consumers.
It's okay. I
you
don't
so
feel
much.
bad. I'm usually the one asking all those questions, so thank you. I see Senatorwoman Kasama's hand, and then I'll go to you, Senator Stone.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. It certainly sounds like you have heard the outcry from, our citizens with these issues we're having in our state, and you're being proactive with researching different ideas and plans from different states. So thank you for doing that. It's critical for all of our citizens here in Nevada. I have two questions. One, at the beginning of your presentation, you talked about and I lost the exact detail, but something with our statute right now for the individual policies that seemed a little restrictive, that sounded like our statute needed to be amended for some of the individual plans. So my first question is, are you as an agency planning on bringing some legislation in that area that would help with those issues?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. For the record, Adam Plain, Nevada Division of Insurance. We currently don't have plans for statutory changes related to wildfire property insurance. Viewing this as it's a multifaceted solution, right? It's not just the insurance portion that affects this. It's building codes, it's mitigation, it's forestry services, all of these different factors. We didn't want to throw a particular item out there in isolation and have people think that that was going to be the magic item that solved everything, or like the commissioner said earlier, have it be done in isolation and make the problem worse for our consumers.
I understand. I probably agree with that too, because, if we become, to your point, if we become too restrictive or too fast with some of this, we might, inadvertently have no insurance carriers that want to write insurance in the state of Nevada. So it will be a long process. I understand. I know our citizens are waiting for something sooner, but I do agree with taking the time and being methodical on it. My second question would be, again, I realize that this will take time to figure out, looking at the different plans that you're researching. But for the FAIR plan or pooled insurance, reinsurance risk, I know you mentioned Florida too, and they had to come up with something because there was no longer carriers were not doing insurance there for many of the coastal places. But I also understand that their reinsurance plan right now is possibly facing bankruptcy, and then there'll be no insurance left again. So it is very difficult. But the one question I had, just kind of a big overthought, let's say for Northern Nevada, a lot of it is the fire insurance there. And if you were to do a reinsurance pool or FAIR plan, would that reinsurance cost be strictly to Northern Nevada insureds, or would that be spread out to all people in the state of Nevada? Obviously, Southern Nevada, we don't have much forest here. How would you see that working? And again, I know you're working on it, but just curious about that.
Thank you for this question, Assemblywoman Kasama. The question is just like the discussion that, again, for the record, Scott Kipper, this just like the question of the policy design. I think that there is a number of ways that this could be addressed. In Colorado, to pay for their FAIR plan, there's going to be an assessment on every policy sold for homeowners insurance across the state. So those on the eastern slope or on the eastern plains will pay the same amount as somebody would be if they lived in Aspen or Steamboat Springs. California has a little different way. If they get to the point where they need additional money, they have the program built in, I believe, to assess carriers. So I think there's a number of ways that this challenge can be addressed. Again, we want to make sure we study this significantly well enough to not disadvantage those consumers who are needing a FAIR plan. We want to make sure it's fair to all the residents in the state of Nevada, and it comes up with a reasonable but a sustainable solution to the challenging issues around affordability.
Thank you.
Senator Stone?
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, for placing this on the agenda. It's a very important issue. And thank you, Commissioner Kipper, for your presentation. The FAIR plan in the state of California, from what I'm hearing from my former colleagues, that the plan is upside down. There may not be enough resources with the fire situation that we see going on there. And so we are going to have to do some careful thought about our FAIR plan. Fortunately, we live in a state where we don't have a lot of the major catastrophes that other states have, such as, hurricanes and tornadoes and massive flooding, and certainly fires that we see to our neighbor to the west. As far as joining a national plan, if you will, I worry that the citizens of Nevada are going to be paying higher premiums to subsidize the damage that's done in other areas of the state. Certainly understand what's going on in Incline Village. That's a fire area. But I just want to just mention that, and would certainly love to hear your comments on that.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Scott Kipper. We have been, I wouldn't say laser focused, but extremely focused on what's taking place in California, not just to the insurance industry, but also to what is happening with consumers and the costs associated with the FAIR plan. I think it's very interesting that they recently raised their levels of coverage from $750,000 per residence to now $3 million, and have increased the levels of coverage for condominium units. Anytime you do that, you're going to have a significant and commensurate response as far as what the premium's going to be. Just stands to reason. So we are watching that and making sure, we understand it as best we can. We do speak with our colleagues around the country with regularity. We've got a national meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. At those national meetings, our Western zone does have a breakout opportunity for a couple of hours to talk about these exact types of issues. So we're very, I don't know if I'm answering your question very well, Senator.
Yes.
But we are incredibly focused on what other states are doing. And again, we want to make sure, does it make sense for Nevada to have a $3 million level of coverage, or is there a better way to design the policy? We understand the challenges with the condominiums in apartment buildings. So what is the best way for us to manage that risk was something that we're still studying. We have heard significant input from those condominium residents and those HOA leadership or organizations as to the best way to do this. We've also had conversation with insurance brokers that specialize in this area, and trust me, they're as frustrated as those condominium owners are when it comes to the availability and affordability of this insurance. So this is a tough nut to crack, and it's a challenge across the board. I don't want to say that Nevada here is at an advantage, but we do have the advantage of foresight or hindsight and looking at what other states have done, what's worked best, and what's not worked. We are in the business now of trying to figure out best practices and making sure we adopt those best practices to the extent that it makes sense for the Nevada marketplace. One of the questions and concerns that we have when we look what's going on to our neighbors to the west, I think it's common knowledge that State Farm has retreated significantly from the number of homes that they're insuring, and there's a number of other carriers that have said we can't continue to have this level of concentration in the policies around the state, so they're withdrawing. We feel that is probably a mortal sin that we are trying to avoid, providing any type of incentive or signage to our carriers that we want to do something to escalate those challenges in Nevada. So we're being very judicious in making sure that doesn't happen. It's a very thin line that we walk, but we want to make sure we do what's best for Nevada consumers.
There was another question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to pivot back to the condo insurance and townhome insurance. Did I hear correctly to say that that is considered to be a commercial policy?
For the record, Scott Kipper, yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. So, and I understand that you don't have as much oversight as you do with residential insurance, but you do have oversight over the regulations of a broker's responsibilities in selling insurance in Nevada, correct?
For the record, Scott Kipper, yes, that is also correct. We do have some oversight on what activities the broker can do. I might add that we work very closely and collaboratively with our broker world and on all lines of insurance, especially now with wildfire issues.
So for maybe some of my colleagues may not know this, the type of insurance that we're talking about is fire and liability, not the interior contents of condos or townhomes, but to rebuild the exterior structure in the event that it's devastated by a fire, and of course liability concerns. And it would be, in my view, a fiduciary responsibility of a broker to make sure that they are insuring a property for its replacement value. Now, we've seen in Nevada, we've seen an escalation in values over the past few years. And prior to this insurance debacle, and HOAs would just renew insurances with a modest 6% increase. But now we're looking at 100% increases and 200% increases. I'm aware of a situation where a broker undervalued a property, a large property, at 28 million instead of 55 million, allegedly, to make sure he could get a reasonable premium and get a renewal for a policy. Is that kind of enforcement something that you oversee and accept complaints on? Is that a responsibility of a broker every year that he authorizes a renewal of this liability fire insurance, that he updates the value of the property to make sure that all the property owners are appropriately insured in the event of a devastating fire? In the event of the 28 million, it should have been 55 million. If there was a devastating fire, we would have people that are going to be losing all their investments, losing their homes. What is your oversight with these brokers, and how does a consumer get you a complaint if they feel that they've paid a premium that isn't commensurate with the replacement value of these buildings?
Senator, that's a great question. Again, Scott Kipper for the record. I would say a couple things to that. If the broker did disclose the fact that they're only insuring to 28 million, and the HOA or who's ever working on behalf of the homeowners association or the condominium acknowledged that fact and knew indeed that they were being insured for roughly half of what the value is, as long as that was disclosed, I don't know that we would have much of a level of authority. However, if, as you pointed out, this was not made known and the consumer was acting upon relying upon the fact that they thought that they had a full $55 million policy, and indeed that was not the case. Certainly the division, once we hear about this, do an investigation, we would have the authority to take some level of action against that broker.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Stone, committee? Okay. Assemblyman O'Neill?
Thank you, Chair. Talking on the FAIR plan, or even if we went with that federal plan, aren't we taking away the incentive for the carriers to offer insurance? And they'll help me understand that part. To me, we're doing away with private enterprise and having government be there.
Assemblyman O'Neill, thank you for the question again. Scott Kipper for the record. That is a concern that we also harbor. We want to make sure that the marketplace works as efficiently as it can. We do not want to get to a situation where carriers are simply saying, no, we don't want any more business. We want everything to go to a fair plan. That's kind of what's happening to our neighbors to the west. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen. It's not good for the California Fair Plan. It's not good for the state of California. And I don't think it's very good for the marketplace at all. We want to make sure we have a competitive marketplace. As was stated in our presentation, Nevada's homeowners marketplace has been profitable, as profitable as any other state in the West over the course of the last 10 to 15 years. We want to make sure carriers realize that there's still an opportunity to make a dollar here and not walk away from good business, to embrace that good business. At the same time, being able to manage that risk so that if there's a home that is completely surrounded by juniper bushes with a shake roof and trees all over the place, that a carrier should have the right to say, that's too much of a risk for us. We want to cede that. Or you need to go to the fair plan. But if there are other homes that have done proper mitigation, that have done very good job of fireproofing, followed whatever building code is in effect to harden their homes to the effect of wildfire, we want to make sure that that's an attractive peril for insurance companies to take on and cover, and not just to simply step away and go over to the fair plan.
You brought up an interesting point in that response. I appreciate it. Why should the state or take on a customer, a client, and insure their house if they've got a shake roof, they've got juniper trees, they've got trees all over? They can't get insurance from XYZ and private insurance company. Why should the state take that risk on for them, and instead of the insurance company saying, you cut the juniper trees, you get rid of the shake roof, you reduce some of your fire hazards, and then we'll insure? I guess I'm at a loss why we should take that responsibility on, let them have their tree. I just don't agree with that.
For the record, Scott Kipper, and Assemblyman, you make a very good point. The whole point of the fair plan is being that insurer of last resort. And if there is no other place to go, that's the point of having a fair plan, so that they can get insurance. If somebody wants to purchase a home, they can get that.
And I apologize. I don't mean to sound argumentative, although I guess I am. I'm still getting back. So you don't want to do anything about mitigating your liability or your possibility of being burned out. Why should the state say, oh, that's fine, then we'll insure you and take care of you? That's what I'm trying to get at. I mean, maybe that's why California, as Senator Stone so well put, is underwater with their fair plan, and I've heard it called regularly the unfair plan. Just help me understand part of this, because that's what I hear you saying is, we don't care if you mitigate your fire risk, we'll still insure you. And that to me just does not make sense for anybody to take that liability on.
For the record, Scott Kipper, and Assemblyman, there are many points I completely agree with you, that if a person is not willing to help themselves, then why should they become essentially covered by a state plan where they have not done any of the work to assist themselves? And I guess it gets back to the concept of the fact that there is no other place for these folks to turn. I agree that, they should be willing to do what they need to do in order to make that peril or that risk a bit more insurable. I agree that there's some challenges you being in the state system like that you're essentially becoming a drag on a potential drag on the program. But I don't think there's any other way to provide insurance that would cover this particular risk.
I feel, and I truly do, I've spoken, as you well know, you and I have spoken so much that I feel like we're family. And by the way, my birthday's coming up. I've got a list for you.
What size golf shirt would you like?
But seriously speaking, and so I do feel for them, but I really do have a problem. Is this part of the reason why California is underwater? They're insuring people that aren't reducing their, do you know why they're having their issues
For the record, Scott,
financially?
I'm sorry to interrupt, Assemblyman. For the record, Scott Kipper. I think that's part and parcel what's driving the challenges of the financial wherewithal of the FAIR Plan. Certainly the increased levels of coverage speak to that. I just don't know that there's, as being an alternative to the market or to the admitted marketplace, and if they're considered too risky by insurance companies, and by law they have the ability to make that determination. There needs to be I shouldn't say that needs, there should be an avenue where these consumers can turn in order to get coverage.
And I agree with you. And I've got some other questions on HOAs about, as Mr. Plain said, they're supposed to be at such a level that they can take care of their own issues. I wonder about that sometimes, because HOAs are usually homeowners that have, some of them may have jobs of their own and pay minimal attention to their issues. Some of them are retired and it's beyond their scope of abilities. I do believe we can give some assistance as the state and should look into it more. And I'd like to carry on the conversation with you more to see what we can do, but do it reasonably. We need to protect all the citizens of the state also too, and look at what is fair and equitable. So, Chair, I really appreciate that you've given me such leeway, and thank you, Mr. Kipper, and thank you, Mr. Plain, for being here today.
Thank you. You all have asked most of the questions that I had, but I just have one more. I know we're talking about fire and mitigation, but one of the things that happens sometimes in a fire is that when it's put out, the part that was burning, the water, but then there's another part that wasn't burning, but you have water and so mold. So does the insurance cover that as part of the downstream, if you will?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Again, Scott Kipper for the record. I believe that most of those insurance policies, when they address the benefit that would be derived, would certainly take all of that into consideration when they adjust that claim and make that offer to the consumer of what they should get coming out of that insurance policy.
Thank you. So the next question would be, we're talking about what is, but I want to go forward to the future. And maybe you said it already, but what about the responsibility of municipal and county planning and zoning operations? Because it seems to me that if we know that there is potential, a greater risk for fire in certain places, then perhaps those places should not be zoned for residential or commercial.
Thank you for the chair again for the question, Madam Chair. For the record, Scott Kipper. The things we've all talked about today is a holistic approach to addressing these challenges. Certainly, it's not just an insurance issue, but as you mentioned, it is a municipal question when it comes to zoning, to building codes. Certainly, that our forestry and our fire chiefs have done a terrific job in mitigating the challenges in our fire challenged communities. So I think as we look at the potential set of solutions, it is not strictly an issue of insurance, but there's a number of different ways or number of different means that could be addressed to address challenges from a different perspective.
And whatever legislation comes up in 25, I would suggest that be a part of it, because as Assemblyman O'Neill said, it appears to be some inequity if people who are not in the fire risk zone paying for those who are. I don't know if they still do it, but at one point in time, I think Florida, for people who were purchasing homes and they were very close to the water, hurricanes, they had to sign something acknowledging they understood the risk, and then whatever insurance they got and however that was paid for, then that was paid for. But that's a concern of mine, because planning and zoning are the ones that say, yeah, you can go over there and build. So
certainly appreciate your observation there, Madam Chair, and we'll certainly, as we work through a little bit more detailed level of a solution set, take that into consideration.
thank you. Additional questions, committee? Okay. Okay. Yes. Assemblyman O'Neill.
You gave me too much time to think. I apologize. Mr. Kipper, you're talking to the brokers about the issues. Is it my understanding that the brokers are saying the carriers aren't writing new plans? They'll renew, but they aren't writing new plans? Or have the carriers actually come forward to you and address why? Just so it's two parts. It's just no new plans, or they'll do renewals but no new plans, and that it's just always it's the brokers talking about it and the carriers are still willing to do something.
For the record, Scott Kipper, and that's a really interesting question. We are very close and work very closely with a number of broker groups, including the independent agents of Nevada. Have done a terrific job of keeping the division plugged in as to what they see in the marketplace. And they are bringing these anecdotal stories of carriers who say they're still in the marketplace, but have certainly tamped down on the number of policies that they're considering or looking at. So in response to that question, yes, what we're seeing from the broker community is a concern that the carriers are not as enthusiastic in their participation in the marketplace. When we talk to the carriers, per our data call, they indicate, yes, we're still writing. There's a number of carriers that are still writing. I might note that there's a handful of carriers that have reached out or we're reaching out to in order to bring them into the state to start writing business. Because the state has been a profitable place to operate, these companies have indicated they'd like to explore this a little bit further to make sure that there's a chance for them to come in. But overall, carriers, yes, we're still writing, but how much they're writing, they've really not been effusive in what that means.
Just hopefully one last question. What is the margin then you say that it's profitable for the insurance carriers to write here and that they're making $1? What is the margin? I mean, in their business, are they allowed to make on their policies?
For the record, Scott Kipper, I think generally if a carrier makes anywhere between a 3 and 5% profit margin, and that's after they've paid claims, after they've operationalized their business, paid the brokers their commissions. If they make 3 to 5%, I think they would consider that a significant level of profit in the state.
Thank you, and I appreciate it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think Senator Stone has another question, and we're going to, just an alert, we're going to have to jump to item 6 because we got somebody with a hard stop. And I'm just going to ask committee members if you can just kind of consolidate questions so we can make sure we get through the whole agenda. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make it very quick. I want to just piggyback on Minority Leader O'Neill's comments about mitigation and what do we do in situations, and we'll go to northern Nevada, Tahoe area, when you have the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency that says, no, you cannot remove the tree, you don't need to clean this area up, even though it's a fire hazard. How do you address agencies like that, and who should be held accountable if there's a fire that could have been prevented?
For the record, Scott Kipper, and I think that's a really excellent question. We have been working with what's the name of the group in? There's an organization based in Incline Village that we've been working with. They are in part and parcel work closely with TRPA, the Tahoe Regional Planning Authority. Historically, the TRPA has been reluctant to make a lot of changes and require the removal of risks in certain areas. I think this is going to have to be certainly a joint effort between insurers, regulators, other state entities, state forestry service, firefighters, anybody that might be involved with the management on the ground of the fires, the fire potential fuels, and what it would look like. So I think, Senator Stone, your question is well intended, and I certainly appreciate that, but it's going to take more than just an insurance approach to it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And we've taken copious notes, and hopefully we can incorporate some of that, and I'll be talking with you after the meeting so we can look at what that looks like in terms of legislation for next session. Okay?
Again, Madam Chair, thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. We truly appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And with that, we will close the hearing on item number 4, and we'll jump to item number 6, presentation on the national trends concerning home insurance challenges and solutions. We have Ms. Karen Collins, who's the Vice President, Property and Environmental American Property Casualty Insurance Association. She will have a PowerPoint, and she is joining us via Zoom. So, Ms. Collins, please begin when you're ready.
Great. Thank you so much. I am getting my screen share set up right now. Hopefully you folks can see it.
We can see it.
On your end? Perfect. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today to discuss the state of the homeowners property insurance market. As mentioned, I serve as Vice President of Property Environmental for the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. For those not familiar, we are a trade association representing home, auto, and business insurers that do have a presence in every community across the U.S. Our mission really is to protect people and help them recover from catastrophic losses. And so I'm here to share with you some insights on the market from a national perspective, but the Commissioner did a very good job expressing some of the challenges, and we're having similar conversations in a number of states on these same issues. I want to start off by first telling you that the insurance industry is extremely strong, stable, and profitable to fulfill our mission. But as you've heard in the discussion, we simply can't make that statement at this time. Property insurance markets, unfortunately, have been rapidly deteriorating in a number of states. The biggest headlines have been really California, Florida, and Louisiana, where we've seen the deepest losses of all the different states. But really, across the U.S., insurers are facing significant cost pressures and increasing natural disasters that are, simply put, straining the capital that the industry has to pay claims. Though in a number of states, we've also seen some unique challenges that are further amplifying some of the challenges insurers are facing. We've had some regulators in some areas that have suppressed or delayed rate increases, which really are critical to raising additional capital that turns what is otherwise an affordability challenge into some of the availability crises that we've seen in these headlines. Now, to illustrate, primary insurers' capital plummeted by over $73 billion in 2022. And from all of the trends that we've been monitoring, the capital still has not recovered from that time frame. Reinsurers separately also experienced capital that contracted by 12%. AM Best recently announced the 2023 year-end results for the industry, and it did show a total industry underwriting loss in the US of about $21.6 billion compared to the prior year, which was also $25.8 billion. So these are significant numbers. Unfortunately, on the personal line side, which does include home and auto, those lines of business experienced the worst results of all. Now, despite rate increases that have resulted in personal lines premiums growing nearly 12% last year, the personal lines insurer specifically still had a combined ratio of 106.7. That means that insurers paid over $106 in claims and expenses for every $100 in premium they collected. So as a result of these ongoing financial challenges, what AM Best announced this spring for the first time ever was they downgraded from stable to negative the entire personal lines home and auto insurance industry. They cited 3 consecutive years of anywhere from $41 to $48 billion in underwriting losses and further suggested that underwriting profitability for home and auto insurers in the near term was highly unlikely. So our industry's challenge is simply supply and demand economics. Insured costs and exposures are rapidly escalating much faster than rate increases. Now, an industry that's losing money on the core activity is not going to attract new investment capital. Now, separately, money insurers invest from premiums is similarly facing pressure, such as stocks and real estate. For example, a strong economy is not an ideal time to buy stocks. And since the pandemic, occupancy rates in commercial buildings is still flagging, making those investments a bad bet at this time. So this all collectively puts greater pressure on other forms of capital, such as reinsurance that the commissioner mentioned, which has become more costly and in some cases limited, while catastrophe bonds also are requiring higher returns to compete with recent higher interest rates. So all of this is contributing to the rising costs of insurance and recent declines in policyholder surplus capital. When there's not enough supply of insurance capital to cover consumers' increasing needs, this is what leads to the availability friction, which is what we're seeing across the US, though pronounced in some states. Now, unfortunately for homeowners insurance, there's a lot of false political narratives about climate change being the leading cause of recent profitability challenges, really suggesting that climate change might make certain regions of the US uninsurable. Now, the hard facts are that the primary cost drivers for increasing property insurance losses has been the increase in exposure values in high-risk areas, meaning the growth of larger and more expensive homes, coupled with the increase in inflation and the cost of building replacement costs and other insurance inputs are those leading cost drivers. Climate change is a secondary factor and really more relevant as a long-term cost driver. There's also legal system abuse and excessive and increasing regulations that are also driving up some insurance prices for consumers. Now, in this graph, you can see the dramatic increase in global natural catastrophe losses over time, which have roughly doubled over the last decade, and a majority of those losses occurring in the United States. In this chart, you can see since 2020, U.S. insurers have incurred nearly $382 billion in losses from natural catastrophes in adjusted to 2023 dollars. And it's become the costliest 4-year period ever for U.S. insurers. Now, when you look at those 4 years specifically, the U.S. has actually accrued 72% of the global insured natural catastrophe losses. So the majority is happening here in the U.S. Now, this graph on the left shows the cost to replace properties in the U.S. has more than doubled over the last decades, meaning, again, more expensive homes that cost more to replace. The right graph similarly illustrates the percentage of new homes that are being built each decade that face wildfire risk specifically. And that has jumped in recent decades as more people are moving to the wildland-urban interface. Now, buildings in high climate risk areas, whether they're prone to wildfire, floods, hurricanes, or tornadoes, these properties will end up paying more long-term for insurance that reflects, of course, those risks. Now, unfortunately, inflation since the pandemic has been very extreme, adding to all of these cost pressures. In 2022, we saw broader inflation hit a 40-year high. Though in these two charts, which show the cumulative impact since the pandemic, you can see property inflation really began to surge in late 2020 and early 2021. While inflation trends have finally begun to level off in 2023, on a cumulative basis, that change in cost inputs remains very elevated. Construction trade services, or essentially labor, still is up 40% on a cumulative basis, while construction materials are up 37%. The cost of rentals, which may be part of the additional living expenses while you're out of your home, those costs are up nearly 30%. And home furnishings, if you were to lose all of the personal belongings that you would have to replace, those costs are up over 20%. So whether a catastrophe occurs or not, this is impacting the cost to rebuild or repair homes from everyday claims like a kitchen fire or a roof. Now, I mentioned legal system abuse is also another concern, and that has actually worsened since a short respite that occurred during the pandemic. But we're seeing increases in jackpot nuclear verdicts and class actions that are very significant. And these issues have been particularly pernicious to some consumers in states like Florida and Louisiana. We mentioned Florida, which has, again, been one of the highest publicized states of challenges. And their Office of Insurance Regulation noted that they had only experienced 7% of homeowners insurance claims nationwide, but was experiencing 76% of the homeowners lawsuits. And there were studies that suggested Florida insurers had paid tens of billions in insurance lawsuits, with the majority going to lawyers instead of injured parties. That is the most extreme of the states, but we're seeing similar trends in many other states as well. Now, overall, the insurance market crisis, as I mentioned, is a simple demand and supply imbalance. Insurance demand is increasing from more expensive cars and homes, inflation, high weather losses, and legal system abuse. The insurance supply is decreasing because losses are increasing faster than the rates. We've seen capital contract, and profitability has been too low to attract that new investment. So that growing mismatch between demand and supply for insurance capital is the reason why credit rating agencies have downgraded the entire auto and home insurance sector, and why there has been an availability crisis in some states, causing insurers to pull back from certain regions of the market. The market generally can't fully stabilize until insurers close the gap between losses and rates. Though we know this is unfortunately going to create greater pressure on consumers as insurance becomes less affordable. So to address affordability challenges, insurers are promoting long-term solutions for reducing costs. Insurers are leading the way through the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, known as IBHS, which the commissioner mentioned. They have developed fortified building standards and very recently science-based wildfire safety standards. Our organization has been working also as part of the administration's Wildland Fire Commission on dozens of wildfire mitigation and safety recommendations, including infrastructure improvements, things like utility infrastructure, land use planning, controlled burns in defensible space, and certainly stronger building codes that can be more ignition resistant to fires. Now, the key for all stakeholders is that we need alignment on the right mitigation actions that in turn result in a meaningful decrease in future losses. And that's where the science of IBHS really has come to the forefront. To illustrate, their Fortified program goes beyond building codes to help homes meet a standard that's scientifically proven to be even more resilient than those codes. Through their research test facility in South Carolina, they have developed a program that can enable homes to withstand up to a Category 5 hurricane. In the wildfire space, they developed a similar science-based resilience program known as Wildfire Prepared Home. Now, the key elements of this program requires establishing at minimum a 5-foot ignition-resistant zone through fire-resistant materials and certainly a defensible space. What you see there in brown is viewed as critical actions to reduce risk. The items in blue do provide another layer of protection. IBHS is actually now taking their research on the road to help demonstrate a side-by-side comparison of how an unmitigated home, illustrated by that on the left, performs against a mitigated home, that you see on the right. Both have fresh, new landscaping purchased from a nursery and planted that same day. The key difference between these structures is the mitigated home on the right has a 5-foot non-combustible zone around the home, referred to as Zone 0. Once burning embers land and ignite the vegetation, flames begin to spread and then ignite the home. The time it takes to burn to the ground for this demonstration is less than 12 minutes. The footage of the burn is actually available online. It's eye-opening to watch. And this is a similar demonstration that was done, I believe, in Idaho that the commissioner had attended. Now, land use policies and building codes are critical enforcement tools, particularly for new construction, though investments are needed to help incentivize individual resilience action by property owners for all of the existing housing stock we have. There's a lot of attention on insurers providing discounts for resilience, though what we caution policymakers to be aware of is that you do need a much broader holistic strategy of incentives, which together are all aligned and reinforcing the same desired actions. As an example, multiple states provided a variety of the incentives that you see here, which are directly tied to the IBHS Fortified program, or are based on mitigation actions consistent with that standard. Alabama currently has over 30,000 fortified designations, which is the highest number by far, and is widely recognized for having lower insurance premiums than their neighboring coastal states as a result of the reduced risk. In the wildfire space, insurers are still at the ground floor and standing up a similar resilience program. The wildfire program is uniquely different as wildfire mitigation requires a minimum set of actions that must be taken together to meaningfully reduce risk. And as the commissioner noted, additionally, defensible space has to be an ongoing effort, and these actions need to be done at a community scale. So these are kind of uniquely different challenges that we're working through and working to quantify the understanding of what that premium value should be. Now, we as an organization have gathered together a number of studies that quantify the cost-benefit ratio of various environmental mitigation actions. We see from these studies the most cost-effective solutions are certainly requiring new buildings to meet stronger building code standards, with a potential saving of $11 for every $1 spent. But there are substantial returns on investment for retrofits as well. But the bottom line is if we do adopt and implement these across states, the safety measures will save lives, preserve the communities, and certainly make insurance less costly over time, especially with targeted funding that can support the most vulnerable populations. So in closing, our top priority is to focus on strategies that help reduce overall exposure and losses, which in turn should help improve insurance costs and choice for consumers. And that is where there's growing alignment on these as key solutions. And we welcome certainly the opportunity to work with all the stakeholders and yourselves on these challenges. So with that, I welcome your questions and comments.
Thank you. Committee, questions? Any questions for committee members on Zoom? Any questions? None down here. Yeah, so I guess I just have one, and it goes back to we were talking about mitigating. So what I said to Commissioner Kipper about planning and zoning, that's included in, looks like it's included in the recommendation. So that's something that probably we need to work on together for that intersectionality. Yes? Is that correct?
Oh, was this to me? I thought you were doing it back to the commissioner. Yeah, we would definitely support
Yeah. No.
any zoning as well as code adoption enforcement. We are working closely with FEMA, who actually does have a lot of resources available to support communities if they're experiencing any financial challenges in code adoption and enforcement. So at the federal level, there's a lot of attention and potentially resources available to support state and local efforts towards that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Committee questions? No? Assemblywoman Bacchus?
Thank you so much, Chair. I just actually had one question. I was taking a look at the financial incentives for resilience, and the last one was insurance incentives. And it says states can encourage insurers to provide premium credits for resilience actions. I know for like auto drivers, people get credit for good drivers, other things like that. What are you envisioning as what states can do to encourage? I thought that was quite interesting use of vocabulary in the PowerPoint.
Yes, there are challenges that we've seen in the past. Florida is a good example where there was mandates for insurance premium credits before they really understood the value of what those should be. In the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew and in 92, and then certainly in the 04-05 hurricane season, there was a number of states that faced 7 landfalling hurricanes that created a lot of financial challenges in those states in the aftermath. Florida was one of the only ones to mandate before those values were understood. And because of the unique impacts on that state, it actually created some adverse impacts that further destabilized. And so when we look at premium credits, we prefer them to be voluntary and flexible to recognize companies' individual unique exposure within their individual portfolios. Also, within the wildfire space, the actuarial science behind what should be the indicated value of these premium credits. We haven't seen the level of losses from wildfires at this level since 2017. So we are trying as an industry to study that. And now that you have a mitigation standard that is well established and accepted and there's alignment, now you need to measure losses with properties that were mitigated to that standard and compare how they were able to perform and survive or not, and what is that loss avoidance benefit. And so the actuarial calculation and analysis and understanding that is still underway. And this is where there's hesitancy by some carriers and that they don't have strong, credible data yet. We're working towards that. But at this stage, as I mentioned, we're at the ground floor standing up what should be recognition of mitigation. Certainly, we know the science says it does help in reducing ignition. But the value of that is where we don't want to get beyond where the science is and risk further harm to certain markets in applying that. So California was the first state. It led in requiring, mandating premium credits. Those were required to be filed with the department over a year ago. The department's actually still reviewing the majority of those filings. Many have not actually been approved yet because they're trying to understand still the actuarial documentation support for those. Many are lower than they would like to see, but the documentation just isn't there yet to substantiate a significantly higher. And so there's trying to be this balance of there's an operational cost to standing this up and validating that recurring nature of the defensible space while trying to also have the value of the mitigation. So we're still early on to know what that's going to be. And the cost trade-off is still difficult and maybe not as robust as we would like it to be at this stage. Not that it won't evolve over time, but that's kind of the challenge right now. So, and why we look at it as voluntary is more preferable until companies have that support.
Thank you so much for that.
Additional questions? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. No questions from the committee, and so then we will close the hearing and we'll open up the presentation, agenda number 5, presentation on the frequency and risk of wildfires in Nevada and current fire prevention programs. And we have 2 presentations. Part A is KC, State Forester and Fire Warden Division of Forestry, Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And so, Ms. Casey, please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Casey, State Forester Fire Warden for the Nevada Division of Forestry. I am here today to talk to you about the wildfire risks and frequency of wildfire in Nevada. I'm sure you guys have heard many of our discussions on this before, as well as the prevention programs that we get to operate not only within the state of Nevada at the Division of Forestry, but with our state, federal, and local government partners in Nevada and across the U.S. So just to give a little bit of background, wildfire frequency. So fire is natural in many ecosystems across the United States at regular return intervals. This can get very data induced. So what you're seeing here is a map of the type of fuels that we have across the state historically and how often fire did return into those communities over time. So as you had these ones that were lower ends of this interval at the lower numbers, you had more frequent but less intense fires. As you have the higher numbers, you had less frequent but higher intensity fires, historically speaking. What's changed in our ecosystems, which we'll talk about in a few slides down the road, is invasive species, primarily brome grasses, both north and south across the state. So when those grow, we have a lot more grasses in the inner space that carry fire differently than our traditional ecosystems would have. Wildfire risk is mapped across the U.S. The West-wide risk assessment was done for all the western states. There were southern states and the Northeast, Midwest also did theirs. So this is Nevada's comparable. Many data layers went into what does risk look like. Those include the historical fire ignitions, the risk in the fuels that exist out there, the potential for ignition. It's where a lightning strike may happen. Obviously, anywhere has the potential of ignition when humans become involved. And then infrastructure. What types of infrastructure is out there? What are we looking to protect? Critical watersheds, important for safe drinking water and all kinds of things, and then other values at risk. So there are many data layers behind what pulls up into this risk data layer. And so what you see here is that much of Nevada is in a low or very low risk area. However, when you zoom in closer, you will see that much to the first presentation from the insurance commissioner, he showed the homes that were dropped for insurance in the state last year, I believe it was. It directly follows where the high-risk red zones are across the I-80 corridor and in the Tahoe Basin. So the Sierra Front I-80 corridor, we have some risk south, higher elevated risk south. This does not mean you can't have fires in all of these ecosystems. You can, and we do, but this is the higher risk areas for hazardous conditions. So we have seen an increase in wildfires across the state of Nevada over time, and the primary cause nationwide is human-caused starts. In Nevada, it's no different. The starts are primarily human-caused. You see in the data that I've provided, there's an undetermined section. Those are primarily human-caused, still under investigation. So we're a little over 60, we average about 60% human-caused starts. That doesn't mean that's the primary loss. Much of our acres burned are usually lightning-caused fires. So we're about 50-50 in acres burned on average over the last 5 years. One of the things to note here is, though you heard earlier, we haven't seen the same devastating loss and from a home's perspective as, say, our neighbors to the west. That was also true in the state of California. If you recall the Angora fire 17 years ago, 254 homes lost, 2,000 acres in the Tahoe Basin. That was the most devastating fire in California's history as far as home loss 17 years ago. Every year since, they have recorded a new record for home losses. So this isn't something that couldn't happen to us. It's something that we have to prevent from happening. Wildfire frequency and increases. This is data, so the map shows you various shades of red. The lighter shades of red are those where we're seeing like 1, 2, or 3 times burn. Where you see the darker shades of red, we're talking 7 different fires in the same area. The more fire in that area, the farther we deviate from our norms as far as what the ecosystem looked like from a vegetative perspective. So when we get an initial fire, it might burn through a little less hot. It might keep the seed bank in the soil, and we might actually see native vegetation come back and return. As we start to see 7 burn intervals frequently, we're most dominantly going to have cheatgrass coming back, and we're going to have a really hard time as vegetation managers to try to get it back to anything native, even to try to get non-natives in there to outcompete some of the cheatgrass areas. Once we start to see cheatgrass coming in as the primary dominant species, we do see our return intervals. You're almost looking at a yearly return rate of fire. And so what we've seen over time is a doubling of the amount of acres in the most frequent 20 years that we had in 20 years prior. So on average, we burn about 450,000 acres a year. But as I'm going to show you in a future slide, that's dominated by weather, and we have bigger peaks than that. Our highest year in recorded history is still 1999, where we burned across the state of Nevada about 1.8 million acres. In all of this, I do want to say that we are very successful in initial attack. Our initial attack success rates last year were close to, if not 100%. That was also due to the fact that we had very few wildfires comparatively, and a lot of firefighters here not fighting fires in other states and fires within our own state. Though even this year we've had, to date, more fires than we had last year alone and more acres burned, we are still about 98% success rate in initial attacks. So most of our fires are kept under that 24-hour period. It's about the 2% that get away that become the most devastating. This is the slide I was speaking of. It's kind of lots of colors, but the gist of the story here is we do know when we're going to have bigger fire seasons just based on weather and the fuel loadings that come with this. So what it's showing you is these are the drought monitor index. So all the reds and the high reds, those are the years that we are in high extreme drought conditions. Those tend to be smaller fire years for the state because in those years we haven't had the great grass growth that you get from these wet winters. So if you look historically, it doesn't mean we don't have fires. It doesn't mean we don't have devastating fires in those timeframes, because you can see by the numbers down below those areas, we do burn. But in the areas that are highlighted in the black boxes, those tend to be, it's the years following those big wet years that end our drought. It's the 2 to 3 years following where we have those significant grass growths. We're not getting that lower elevation snow compaction of that grass in this winter seasons up here in northern Nevada, and they continue to compound on each other, which is kind of, you see, we are here. This is where we are, although we're still faring well in the fire department, so we will knock. Generally speaking, when we head into these years, we as agencies begin to prepare a little bit differently because we start to see firefighter fatigue. They are going all the time. We have mandatory rest days for firefighters. We ensure that they get those. They're going in-state, they're going out of state. They're making sure that they're fighting every fire that we have. So we start to see a lot more firefighter fatigue, mental health issues. This year, what we were looking at is kind of what we're starting to see. The higher elevation did have and carried forward a pretty significant normal snowpack in all areas across Nevada. So we anticipated a much later start in those higher elevations, a much more of a concern in those lower elevation grass shrubland areas. And staffing shortages are always an issue, although in Nevada we have had pretty good success in hiring firefighters and retaining them, thanks to a lot of help you guys have given on allowing us to hire differently. What does it look like when you have 2 wet winters? We obviously came out of, this is looking at winter snowpack conditions. In April of 2023, as you all know, we were well above average across Nevada in our snowpack, which actually helped to dampen down at those lower elevations some of the cheatgrass that had grown over the years. This year, we did have a little above normal, but mostly normal snowpack. But lots of spring moisture, which is what this next one shows. Moisture across the state significantly higher than normal, although a couple little dots show that we were normal or below. Basically showing that we have large grass growth, we have carryover from the year before, and so these are the years where we start to get to worry about big fires in the state. You look at our drought comparison, late April of 2022, most of the state was in extreme or high drought issues, which usually, like I said earlier, lower fire potential. This year, almost all of the state is out of drought conditions. That won't remain forever. We have much cycling in the drought conditions, but only just a portion of the South still in moderate drought conditions. This is the National Predictive Services outlook for August and September. September and October. August looks much like September, although there's a little bit more red. If you look at this, they're looking at fuel moistures, they're looking at fire activity, they're looking at lightning potential, dry lightning potential, all of these things. And that's how you get these very above average risk ratings. So this year, we kind of knew as we came in, we were going to have a regular start to the fire season, which means about June, July, and then we were going to move into a heavier season this fall, depending on what comes. What are we doing for prevention? I wanted to talk quickly about our camera system. We do have a very coordinated camera system across the state of Nevada. Many of you have seen probably the pictures on the screen. It's an open to the public website where everybody can watch these cameras, and it's been super helpful actually because people do spot smoke. We do have detection systems in many of these cameras that are auto detecting. They're rotating and spinning all the time and looking for fire starts. And so it can auto-detect. Our dispatch centers are able, and some of our fire management officers across multiple agencies can spin these cameras. So if we know that we have a fire in a location or we see a smoke start, we move the fire toward that location. This has helped our dispatch centers to locate fires. As you know, people driving down I-80 may not know exactly where they are. So when they report a fire, it's very hard for our dispatch centers to figure out where exactly that fire might be. This has greatly helped in that. It also helps us to look at that fire, see how it's moving just from the way that the smoke is columning, and then it helps our dispatch centers to know kind of what we really need to dispatch, whereas before we would have dispatched the moon. We actually start to look at what does it actually look at out there. The camera system is an interagency system. Many people have put funds into this system and everybody can use them. As far as this fire season, Nevada has done a lot of things differently, and I will say that many times throughout my slides. We are one of the only states in the nation to have completed PODs. PODs, we always have acronyms because that's what we love. They're potential operational delineations for our entire state. Many states only delineated for their high-risk areas. What do pods do for normal people? So when we start to we are at preparedness level 4, which means that we're starting to see fire across the U.S. We're starting to tap into national resources, and we're starting to hit a level where we don't have a lot of resources available. So when we start to go into preparedness level 4 and 5 across the nation, we should start to worry because that means the assets aren't available. What pods do, we start to draw resources. So this is when you start to see incident commanders come from Florida to fight fire in Nevada. How does a guy from Florida or gal from Florida know about Nevada's ecosystems? That's what pods do. We tell them exactly what's out there. We tell them, we give them a rancher liaison in many areas where we have ranching communities. We also embed a local person from our state with them. And basically it shows them all of the fuel breaks that we have in place, everywhere they can safely defend this fire, all the natural breaks where they can plan for a fire to slow so that they can safely put firefighters out there to fight these fires. We are the host, Nevada is the host of 5 incident management teams this year. Incident management teams scale up and scale down based on size of the incident and complexity of the incident. We have never fielded 5, and that's more than most of the states have this year. So we're really proud of the work that we've done. We have one of our first interagency training modules for wildland fire use. It was the Arc Dome. We had the Nevada Division of Forestry had positions in Ely being hired. The Forest Service had a crew, the Arc Dome crew in Ely, that was going to move to Utah because they were unable to hire. And we married up our positions that we had. We had just all the right positions. We were just 2 different agencies, and we created an interagency crew. So we're really proud of the work that we're doing across agency. We never would have done this 20 years ago. So it matters. Fire doesn't care whose jurisdiction or what color patch we have when we show up. They only care that we fight the fire. So we are acting differently as we move into fire seasons in the future, and we have been in the recent past. So wildfires in Nevada, as you heard earlier, it requires more than just safe and effective wildfire response. It does require that, but it also requires us to create fire-adapted communities. We've got to harden homes. We've got to ensure that people understand the risks that they live in, and we have to make sure that we have resilient landscapes surrounding them because fire is natural, and we want fire to move differently through these ecosystems. So hitting on our resilient landscapes, and when I say our, I'm not talking about just NDF, but this is all of our partnerships, state, federal, local government. We have worked really hard at treating more acres. We are in our 5th year in a row of treating more acres than we've burned in the state. Yes, that's a little bit luck and a lot of chance. But when we have firefighters who aren't fighting fire, they are actively out there mitigating. So less fire means we can mitigate more. We have treated a lot of good acres. It doesn't matter necessarily the number, but we are working in a different way to treat the acres that are most important across the state. Our shared stewardship agreement, I'm sure you guys have heard about that. It was signed in 2019 by the governor. It is up for renewal this year and will be signed hopefully sometime in September or October. This agreement was a 5-year agreement to make state and federal agencies work differently. We have to outplan. We've got to look 5 years out. We've got to pick the high priority areas where we're going to mitigate fire risk, those areas that are of highest risk. It doesn't mean we're not going to work in the other areas. It means that we're going to take our limited funds and assets and resources and address those issues first. And we did. We met every deliverable that we put into that first agreement. Our target was an increase of 50 of acres treated in those priority areas by 50%. We overshot that, exceeding about 200% of the acres treated. We to date, so this is a map of the areas in which we had designated. There were 13 landscapes designated. 20 years ago, we had come together to try to explain where the risk was. We couldn't even agree on the problem, let alone where those areas were. This time, we designated 13 very easily. They weren't a shock to anybody. And these include areas of pristine sagebrush habitat where we are concerned about how fire will change those ecosystems, and areas, obviously, that have seen a lot of fire. So 7 of those landscapes currently have landscape level. So this started at an executive committee. It moved down to a technical advisory committee within state and federal agencies. And then it moves to a landscape level where they're actually saying, here's what we need to do in the next 5 years. Here's the big landscape we told you we're worried about. They're going to tell us exactly how they're going to treat those acres and where in those communities. So 7 of them are active and have 5-year plans of work. And we're really proud of the work that they're doing at the ground level. And it's much broader at the ground level than just state and federal agencies. It's local government. It's nonprofits and for-profit companies, and it's landowners and homeowners. One of the other things we are doing as far as prevention and mitigation is Fire Adapted Nevada program. So the Fire Adapted Nevada program is an interagency program for federal, state, local government, private industry, trying to help educate homeowners about their risk and about grants that they can find to reduce that risk. Part of that is a nationally recognized FireWise community. So nationally, you can become recognized that you recognize your risk and you've taken steps to mitigate. This is where you're talking home hardening, looking at, your roof replacements and your grate replacements. You're looking at defensible space and making sure that not just each home within this community, your home has it, but every home has it. And then working with your federal, state, local government partners whose land adjoins your neighborhood. And then we're doing those larger landscape halos around the outside to protect that community. That's what insurance companies are looking for, and that we're sustaining this. To be a FireWise active community, you not only have to invest up front, but you also have to invest every year to retain that national status. So this year alone, our interagency partners in 2023 completed 181 community wildfire risk assessments across Nevada. We conducted 605 defensible space inspections across the state, telling homeowners what they might want to remove and things they might want to do. And then we recruited 21 new FireWise communities. Back, I think it was just 5 to 10 years ago, we had 2 in Nevada. We have 52 today. So we've spent a lot of time in the homeowner education. We work with the university, Living with Fire program and their outreach so that we can, as agencies, have a single voice for homeowners. It's very confusing when we all start speaking our agency jargon to homeowners. So we recognized very early on that we had to have a single voice and we had to produce documents for the community that addressed all of our issues in one voice. That's been very successful. I did want to insert here that we also have a lot of grant programs that go out, and to an earlier question that Chair Spearman had on planning and zoning. Obviously, I don't have anything to do with planning and zoning. It is certainly an issue, and it has led to increased fire costs at the increased, as you see fires increasing, also cost is increasing because we have a lot more homes to protect. The protection of homes greatly increases your costs. FEMA historically was the primary funder of those types of programs through their HMGP, the Hazardous Mitigation Grant Program, and BRIC. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but as all of you know, FEMA is very hard. It's a hard process to get through as far as an application, so we are working on trying to solve that. Part of the infrastructure bill did provide money to the state of Nevada in the Division of Forestry for a community wildfire defense grants, which can do many of those same things. Anything that's in their community wildfire protection plan, from home hardening and all of those things, through funding from the Forest Service to the state. So we are working very hard to try to get that money in the right places to try to ensure that we reduce that risk across the board. This slide just shows you, this is all entities across Nevada, what we have available this year. As far as firefighting assets, we talk all the time, our interagency partners, with local government. How many engines do we need? How do we need to beef up the aircraft availability? And so the state has gone into statewide contracts, which we hadn't done before, for air assets to try to help in high fire danger years. So we have single engine air tankers and super scoopers under contract at the state level to help protect that get billed in the same way we bill all of our other interagency assets. One of the key approaches, as I said, for us in wildfire mitigation is we have a lot of different, we can't just aggressively attack wildfires. That is our goal, is to aggressively attack all wildfires. But we also need to ensure that that workforce is trained in mitigation. We've been doing that. We need to make sure that they're attacking as aggressively the mitigation and the rehabilitation so that we stop seeing that repeat fire cycle. So that is what we're doing in our shared stewardship grant program. We were the only state in all 50 states to actually, all of the other states, when they went into their shared stewardship agreement, it was an agreement between the U.S. Forest Service and their Division of Forestry state agency. We recognized in Nevada, because of land ownership, that would not work, and we included all federal and state agencies that had some tie into wildfire mitigation and reduction. So now other states are looking to our agreement. It was hard. It was not easy negotiating with that many entities. 2 of us would have been easier. 15 of us was much harder. But I think the outcome of that was much different. And as an agency, we have taken on things like homeowner education and ensuring that we're pushing them and helping them. FEMA's grant application, like I said, is very complicated. We have taken those on behalf of homeowners associations and communities to try to get through the process a little easier. I will say we were no more successful than others were. And that's something we've been working on. I had the fortune of being on the Wildfire Commission at the national level, and many of the things that you guys were speaking of earlier were addressed in those recommendations to Congress, 178 recommendations to Congress on how do we better work together with insurance and homeowners to fix this issue at the national level. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Committee, questions? Yeah. Assemblyman O'Neill.
I promise to make it quick. In one of your last slide or next to last, you talk about aggressively attacking wildfires in Nevada. And I apologize, the names all run together. The years seem to just be the same. We have fires. But I know the question is, is there still the policy to let it burn as we experienced on the Nevada-California line? I think it was 3 years ago, does that sound right? Where it started burning in California side, they let it burn and it ends up to be a major fire. Are we still exposed to that policy of?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman O'Neill. For the record, Casey. The let burn policy, no. And yes, no, and yes, no, yes, no. No, there is no let burn policy. Every fire is to be aggressively attacked. You're probably speaking of the Tamarack fire, and it was, I think, 3 years ago. And that fire was determined to be unsafe for firefighters at the initial onset of the fire. When they looked at I didn't look at it. We were told afterward, but they were looking at how far it might spread and then how safe it was to input firefighters. There is a risk analysis that all of us have to make when we're looking at lives of firefighters, and we do not put firefighters in some scenarios where we do not think that they're going to safely come out. So they did a risk analysis on that initially, and then it did take off, I think, about 7 days later. So for the most part, across the U.S., there is not a let burn policy. There is a policy of trying to get it out most immediately, but part of what plays into that, it's kind of a multifaceted issue. Also, that fire started on July 1st of whatever year it was. That same July 1st, we had about 32 starts across the state of Nevada and multiple in California. When you're in an interagency dispatch center, that's part of what these leaders are having to do is look at how many fires we have and the assets that we have available to us, the areas where we're going to be most effective in immediate suppression, and we are attacking each fire. So sometimes there are fires that do not get immediate suppression, and it's not because we're letting it burn, it's because we don't have the assets to safely burn, if that helps to understand a little bit of the process of thinking.
I appreciate that education and continuing with that, because I thought there was a policy if it was a lightning strike or a natural start that they would let it, because there is value to fires. I mean, to the health of the forests, and not everything should be put out. But now you're saying that we actually have the attitude of any fire we will attempt to extinguish. Is that what I understand correctly? And not there was an older policy?
Thank you for the question. Again, for the record, Casey, yes. There is, so I think what you're talking about is fire for resource benefit. They have called it a million different things over the years. It was a federal policy. That is still in place. The difference between the old version of that policy, it was like if the Forest Service decided that this was something that was of resource benefit, they didn't really talk to any cooperators about what that might do. They had points at which they were looking to hold it, and then we would be contacted kind of on the backside when the bad thing was coming out into our jurisdictions. We do have a policy that says in some areas, and those areas have to be pre-designated, that fire would be beneficial, but only under certain conditions. So for the most part, during the summer seasons, you can't meet those conditions. So it would be full suppression. If we all, as an interagency group, decided that that fire was beneficial and we wanted to let it burn, which we have not done here in Nevada, but if we did, we would man it like a prescribed fire. So there would be certain points at which you would be looking to say, if it goes beyond this perimeter, we're going to start to aggressively attack, and we're going to have people on that to make sure it does not go beyond that perimeter. So we still have that availability, and I do think it's something that all of us would like to use more. It's just that in the current conditions right now in the summer months, it would be very, very hard, if not impossible, to meet those parameters that have been preset in those locations.
Thank you for that education. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you, Chair, for the time.
No problem. There's no questions? I just have one, and it's been about 6 years since I was on the Homeland Security Commission. But I'm listening to this and thinking about the presentation that Insurance Commissioner did. And it might be a good idea to make sure that you two are somewhere on that commission, because if we're talking about fires that are burning out of control, we're talking about using a lot of our assets. And at some point, it might even be military assets. The other thing would be communications, lines of communications, to make sure that they are open, and the interoperability between state, municipal, and county. And I think that would probably be important. I'm thinking now, it's a bunch of scenarios that are going through my military mind, and thinking that if we don't integrate this and do it quickly, then we could be in, a mell of a Hess. So the other thing that I'm thinking about, though, too, is the money that we lose as a state, and being a state that we don't have a state income tax. We're talking about the loss of disposable income. So there are a number of intersections, if you will, that I think that I see that are associated with this. So it might be a good idea to have that discussion. That is at the executive level, but it might be a good idea to have that discussion to make sure that that happens. Last but not least, what some people don't recognize is that, or know, is that Nevada is a Dillon's Rule state. It's not home rule, it's Dillon's Rule state. And so I'm going to really look strongly at how we as a state can implement some of the things that we've talked about in terms of planning and zoning at the municipal and the county level, because if we leave it up to the 17 counties, we may have 17 different ways of doing it. We could come up with 20 different ways of doing it. And so I think that continuity, for continuity's sake, make sure that we do this at the state level. Does that make sense? Comments?
Thank you, Chair Spearman, for the question or the comments. Yes, I agree. And I want to assure you, we are in talks with the Department of Emergency Management, and we have an agreement with the Nevada National Guard. DEM has the agreement for all emergencies other than wildfire. We have it for wildfire. We did activate the National Guard already once this year for fires in Nevada, and actually have deployed them right now to California through our state-to-state agreement with California. So we do mobilize those assets. We do have those conversations of Homeland Security. Communications is the number one cause of fatality and injury in this industry for firefighters. And so we are in constant communication about how we can communicate, making sure our radios talk across frequency channels. All of those things are very, very important to us. And we did actually, and we still are trying to build, like California did, crews with National Guard assets. It was a way for a permanent job placement when you come back from your Guard assignment. So we are working on getting those crews out this year. We've been training them every year. Unfortunately, the 2 years we trained them before, there was no fires, and so it was very hard to get them out. So we do hope to get them out this year. We are always looking at inventive and creative ways to make sure that we're all working very closely together. But we could, as always, be better coordinated as well.
Thank you. And if we're deploying Nevada National Guard to California, we're talking about Title 10, and so there's probably some interoperability we need to make sure is in place with the federal government as well. So, just my thoughts. Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This is an education, so thank you, thank you. We'll now have a second presentation. Daniel Howard, Natural Disaster Protection Program Execution. And Chloe Chisholm, Government Relations, both from NV Energy. Begin when you're ready, please.
Yes, thank you. Make sure you can hear me. Thank you. Chair Spearman and committees of members of the committee, thank you for having us today. We do appreciate the time today to talk about NV Energy's Natural Disaster Protection Plan. My name is Danielle Howard. I'm the director for NV Energy's Natural Disaster Protection. NV Energy has created a program and actually created a unique title for our Natural Disaster Protection Plan in a means to differentiate it for our customers to be easily identified as Power Safe. So you'll hear me refer to Power Safe as well as Natural Disaster Protection Plan. Our acronym for that is NDPP. So the Public Utility Commission of Nevada approved the second triennial Natural Disaster Protection Plan for NV Energy. The plan is an expanded plan over the first triennial. So the first triennial plan was approved for 3 years from 2020 through 2023. So we have just embarked on our second triennial, which will run through 2026. The plan increased costs up to $331 million. That includes $202 million for operation and maintenance costs and $171 million in capital investments, plus an additional $98 million for capital improvements that will be accomplished beyond that Natural Disaster Protection Plan. Those costs are deferred into a regulatory asset account for the operations and maintenance costs. Those costs are recovered through a single rate, and that is a combination of both Nevada Power customers as well as Sierra customers. Capital expenditures are recovered through a jurisdictional rate, which simply means that those costs are recovered by the rate class for the service territory in which those investments are made. I'll go to the next. So looking at the state of Nevada, we have used a risk-based approach to identify the highest areas of risk and prioritize that risk along our overhead system. So looking at the state of Nevada, and as mentioned earlier, the highest risk areas are Tier 3. And let me just back up for a moment. We prioritize the risk and label those areas as Tier 3, Tier 2, Tier 1 elevated, and Tier 1. Tier 3, being the highest risk areas, are located in the Lake Tahoe Basin, as well as the Virginia City Highlands, and also Mount Charleston, located in southern Nevada. In the new triennial plan, which just came into effect in 2024, NV Energy was able to successfully adopt a new tier, which is Tier 1, and that was to pull in the wildland urban interface areas. And through that plan, another key change was to escalate Virginia City Highlands from what was previously a Tier 2 to a Tier 3. The plan itself is comprised of several different elements that all work together. On the asset hardening, so the capital investment side, the plan includes rebuilding overhead lines with covered conductor and evaluating selective areas for undergrounding, using non-wood pole alternatives, as well as replacing expulsion fuses with a non-expulsion alternative. So as of today, all of Tier 3 for Nevada has been fully implemented with a non-expulsion alternative. We've also adopted situational awareness. So for an electric utility, a new element for us is that we did onboard 2 meteorologists that both have backgrounds in fire science, behavior, as well as fire forensics, and onboarded fire mitigation officers who have the knowledge and experience in the field with both firefighting and codes. Along the lines of situational awareness, we have, through partnerships, either funded fully or partnered in cost sharing, the implementation and installation of both weather stations and fire cameras, and most recently are using AI technology, as well as technology that would aid in the early detection of fire in darkness. So that's a new pilot program that we've implemented. On the maintenance side, NV Energy's programs include expanding what was traditionally a tree trimming vegetation management program to an enhanced vegetation management program that partners with our local fire agencies in those high-risk areas to remove the ground fuels, not only in the right-of-way, but through some of those partnership agreements, allowing partners to leverage grants to create what's called a resilience corridor. And that resilience corridor is the inset in green on this PowerPoint slide. And that resilience corridor allows ground fuels to be cleared voltage dependent. Up to 1,000 feet would be the maximum, but it's varying levels of clearance, thinning, and just overall support of the forest health. The inspection and overhead inspection program involves circuit patrols annually, as well as detailed inspections based off those tiers on a cycle basis. To date, that program is running actually ahead of schedule in terms of resolving conditions that it finds for all of the high-risk conditions. So a priority 0 condition is resolved immediately, and the priority 1 conditions are resolved within 10 to 12 weeks of being discovered. So in addition to both our short-term and long-term programs, NV Energy also it has enhanced fire season protocols. So during fire season, NV Energy does place the overhead system into what we call fire season settings, and also enacts power safety outage management program, which involves proactively de-energizing the system when there are forecasted conditions that meet a high risk. That would be predominantly it's weather, fuel conditions, wind speeds, humidity. 2021 through 2023, NV Energy has actively conducted power safety outage management or proactive de-energization. We de-energized 3 times in 2021, 8 times in 2022, and twice in 2023. One of the enhancements to the 2024 fire season protocols is that we have expanded that proactive de-energization across the electric system. So today, if those conditions meet or exceed the threshold necessary, we will enact a de-energization anywhere on the overhead system. 2 other enhancements to NV Energy's wildfire protocols this year involve placing the system in what's called a fast trip mode. It simply means that we have programmed the system to shut down naturally when it sees a fault. It does that today under a normal course when the system detects a fault. But what we have learned through research and testing is that being able to minimize the amount of time that it takes and eliminate any spark in doing so decreases the chance of an ignition by almost 68%. So that fast trip fire mode, which is, it truly is a leading standard today in system protection settings and engineering. That has been implemented fully in Tier 3, and we are actively expanding that into Tier 2 and Tier 1E, and we expect to be at 75% implementation by the end of 2025. So finally, the last addition to fire season protocols is the emergency de-energization for wildfires, and where the proactive de-energization forecasts potential for fire, the emergency de-energization looks at active wildfires that are in the area, and when they've been deemed to be uncontrolled or unpredictable, we will de-energize the system. If there is a threat of an energized system coming into conflict, or a fire coming into conflict with an energized system and causing additional ignition points. So in closing, I would just like to thank you once again for providing the opportunity for NV Energy to share what is now our second triennial natural disaster protection plan. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Committee, questions? Any of our committee members? I see Senator Stone. You're muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the moment there, and thank you for the presentation. We've seen in certainly other states weather-related incidents where significant fires were caused by wind events, and so a lot of states have required a lot of electrical utilities to harden their infrastructure. So one of those areas is that they've suggested replacing wood poles with steel poles or composite poles. And 2, which I think is probably one of the most important things, is using insulated wire, which will decrease the spread of fires to vegetation, especially if a pole comes down or a wire comes down to a wind event. And then you already talked about fast track settings, and I'm really happy to hear that you guys can quickly shut off an area that has a potential for the wind to cause or initiate a fire that could become a very large fire. But with respect to the fast trip setting, and I know I'm asking you a bunch of questions at once, so we'll save time, do you sectionalize those devices so that you can minimize impacts to other areas instead of shutting, an entire corridor down?
Okay. So the first comment was the non-wood poles. So we are using ductile iron poles. We are replacing wood poles with ductile iron poles in areas where we have access to maintain those poles. So in areas that we are going back with a wood pole, those poles are wrapped with fire mesh. And so the fire mesh itself protects that asset and actually supports re-energization in the event of a fire. The next comment was along the lines of covered conductor. So we have already converted some of our lines in the Lake Tahoe Basin to covered conductor on both the North Shore and the South Shore, and that is an industry standard now for those fire risk areas. And the third statement is sectionalization. So we've done a great deal of sectionalizing in the high risk areas as it relates to that proactive de-energization. So for PSOM, that's not necessarily on the fast trip side, but it is for proactive de-energization. And we've actually sectionalized so that we can break some of those areas into what's called a proactive a PDZ, proactive de-energization zone. And I would just add that, the industry is changing very quickly. The technology is changing quickly, and we are working with the other utilities in the other states along the lines of not just the technology for risk assessment or the technology for the materials that we're putting in the field, but also, looking at, the real and imminent risk of catastrophic fire. So, recognizing all of those things that the parties before me spoke of, we're also looking at recognizing that numerous utilities have sought, also through legislation and applications with the public utility commissions to create financial mechanisms to also manage and prepare for the increasing wildfire risk, in addition to the material and operational side. So I would just add to that, I know it wasn't part of your question, but I would say that they're all really bundled together, and that is that, NV Energy also plans to seek a similar approval that utilities in California have received from their California Public Utility Commission, for some of those self-insurance funds. So truly that, as well as the materials, operational, and risk-based approach all work together. Thank you.
So can I just follow up to say, are you required annually to give a wildfire mitigation plan to the RPUC to show them the progress making? And I appreciate your answers, and I'm impressed with NV Energy that you're taking all these steps, because obviously we're talking about the loss of property and in a worst case scenario, the loss of life. But as you know, as you've seen through the PG&E debacle in California, there's significant exposure for you, NV Energy, and we want to ensure that we do everything we can to protect our very valuable constituents and their property.
Thank you for those statements, Danielle Howard, for the record. Yes, we do realize that. And we report to our Public Utility Commission really twice a year. So each year in September, we are required to provide a progress report. It's an informational report that provides progress on the first 6 months of every year. The only year that a progress report is not filed would be that year that we're also filing a new triennial plan. In addition to that, we do go through a regulatory asset recovery process annually. So at the end of the year, we're also preparing a progress report that not only documents the process and progress of the plan, but also the prudence and reasonableness of the costs associated with that plan. So it is a twice a year information to our Public Utility Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Additional questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Howard.
Okay,
I appreciate the information.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now we will go to item number 7, and that is a presentation on the national, certified registered nurse anesthetist in Nevada. I see Mr. Clark, Ms. Watt, okay. Okay, please begin when you are ready, and I guess, Mr. Clark, you're leading?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Tom Clark. I'm here on behalf of the Nevada Association of Nurse Anesthetists. I'm going to get that word down really, really soon. We very much appreciate this opportunity to come before you today. Really enjoyed the discussions on wildfire and the insurance side of things, too. It's a very, very important issue up north, as you can tell by the haze that we woke up to this morning. I will introduce Mr. Savnak and Ms. Watt from the Nevada Association, and we will do a brief, where are the CRNAs now? What are we looking at doing in the future? And then take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Art Savnak, S-A-V-I-G-N-A-C, and I am the president of the Nevada Association of Nurse Anesthetists, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak today. What we would like to discuss is the status of an APRN bill, and what we would like to present to you is how we propose to improve, supplement, and make anesthesia care more accessible to the citizens of Nevada. A little background on me. I have been a certified registered nurse anesthetist, and I will say CRNA from now on, for the last 34 years. 15 of those I have provided service in the United States Army. I retired as a lieutenant colonel in 2005. During that time, I had the opportunity to educate, deploy, 2 years in special operations, taking care of soldiers all over the world, as well as going to the Republic of Korea and being the chief of the anesthesia service there. That background prepared us for a move to the state of Nevada in 2008. We lived in Elko for 9 years, where I was a member of the Ruby Dome Anesthesia. We took care of all of our patients in Elko County. We provided coverage expertly, I might add, safely, and quality care that I would like to discuss with you today about how we're going to continue to do that in this state. As of today, this has prepared me to be the president, which I am now, of the Nevada Association of Nurse Anesthetists. We have approximately 110 to 140 on any given day CRNAs that come that are practicing in the state. The CRNAs practice in this state in urban settings, rural settings, in critical access hospitals, and in small community hospitals, as well as in city hospitals, University Medical Center in Vegas, multiple hospitals in Las Vegas, and in Carson Tahoe Medical Center. What we do provide every day is anesthesia care in both settings that are supervised by physician anesthesiologists in urban settings, and in rural settings, we are supervised by surgeons, and they provide basically the medical oversight that we have in order to practice on a daily basis. What we have encountered was that SB 336 passed in March of 2023. And what that essentially has done is it has created a two-tiered system of anesthesia care provided by nurse anesthetists in this state. Basically, the CRNAs in rural areas are practicing under a different set of standards than CRNAs are in urban areas. And what we would like to do is rectify this so CRNAs are practicing under one set of rules, one set of standards to govern all anesthesia care provided by CRNAs in the state of Nevada. We have, currently, we have, pardon me. What we have encountered is that because of this two-tiered system, that we have lost members. We have 2 board members within the last year that have left the state of Nevada because the 336 did not allow them to practice, and they felt that they were not protected by state law to practice as advanced practice registered nurses. What we would like to do is to have the protection of advanced practice registered nurse status. To this end, what we have done is we have garnered support of the Board of Nursing. We have presented to them and gained unanimous support from them. We have also garnered support from the APRN board within the state. We have approached the Rural Hospital Association about their support, and we have many stakeholders that are supporting our position to this day. And we anticipate their support as we go forward, going into 2025 in the legislative session. Having APRN status, what it will do is it will allow us to practice under one set of standards. What we have currently is, if we gain this, an advanced practice registered nurse is what we seek, is a nurse who is authorized to prescribe controlled substances, poisons, dangerous drugs, and devices pursuant to NRS 639.2351. We shall not prescribe a controlled substance listed in Schedule 2 unless the advanced practice registered nurse has at least 2 years or 2,000 hours of clinical experience, which every student nurse anesthetist gains before they become a providing anesthesia, an anesthesia practitioner. And the controlled substance is prescribed pursuant to a protocol approved by a collaborating physician. Basically, what this says is that we are prescribing medication within a medical facility. Discussion has come up that we are looking for prescriptive authority to prescribe medication on an outpatient basis, and this is not the case. What we are looking for is the ability to provide medication to our patients on a daily basis that we are trained to provide, that we understand the actions, the side effects, and the effects of these medications that we work with on a daily basis. What we look for is, in anesthesia, there is an acronym that I like to say, it is 99% boredom and 1% terror. Leading up to that 10%, or that 1% terror is 10% of an extremely stressful event that is going to lead you to a critical event. In that time, in that 10%, and medications need to be administered, one thing that we have encountered with 336 is that we have to obtain orders from a physician to prescribe a medication that we need to give on an emergent basis. This has made patient care, or will make patient care suffer if we have to wait for an order to be given. These are medications that we are trained to administer, trained to prescribe, and understand the effects and the side effects of these medications that we have been trained to do. If we gain APRN status, what it will do is it will put us in line with states that have APRN status: Arizona, California, Utah, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. Every one of these states has APRN status, in addition to others throughout the United States, but the ones that are all contiguous with the state of Nevada have APRN status, and we are we are hoping to gain that status within this state. Under current law, under 336, CRNAs are not APRNs. The provisions that apply to APRNs, including prescriptive authority, do not apply to CRNAs. So basically, in the eyes of the state, we are nurses that accept orders, even though we have been trained with well over 2,000 hours of clinical experience, pathophysiology, pharmacology, anesthesia. We have been trained to provide these services to our patients on a daily basis. And in the eyes of the state, we have a two-tiered system that does not allow the majority of CRNAs in the state to practice to the full extent of their licensure that CRNAs are able to practice at in other states. So for CRNAs that are outside of a critical access hospital, like I said, in Las Vegas or in Clark County or Washoe County, they must obtain orders from an attending anesthesiologist and are not able to provide these medications that we need to provide on an emergent basis to any patient that may require them. So what we are seeking, like I said, is APRN status. We are looking to equalize the playing field. We want to have one standard of care across the state, throughout the state, for every patient that we provide anesthesia care to. CRNAs have been providing anesthesia care for over 100 years, safely and effectively throughout the United States and the world. CRNAs are not exclusive, but in the military provide the vast majority of anesthesia care. In just about every field unit and in every forward surgical team, CRNAs are the exclusive anesthesia providers. And the government recognizes that the training of CRNAs allows us to provide care, critical trauma access anesthesia care on a daily basis to our soldiers in need. And we are searching for this ability in this state. What I would like to do now is entertain any questions, if you may have any.
Committee questions? Okay, Vice Chair.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I know we've met one or two times about this issue, but unless I misunderstood you, earlier you stated that because of 336, CRNAs were leaving our state. Is that what you stated? Okay.
Savanac, yes, ma'am. They are leaving the state. We have had, within the last year, 2 of the board members. We have 7 members of the Nevada Association of Nurse Anesthetists board. 2 of them have left the state to provide or to seek other opportunities. 1 in California, 1 in Oregon, both states that have APRN status, and they feel that they were both practicing in 1 in Washoe, 1 in Clark County, and they felt that their care, that if any event occurred, they would not have any backup. That they would be on their own. So they felt it was safer to move to another state that had protections written into state law.
Thank you. So prior to 336 and in last session, could a CRNA administer the proper medication without a doctor's orders? Essentially in an independent practice, right?
Savanac, not particularly independent practice. And what it was and written into the law is that CRNAs can practice under the direction of a physician, whether it is a surgeon, podiatrist, obstetrician, dentist, that we are able to provide anesthesia services under their guidance or under their supervision. So we are not practicing independently. We may practice without the presence of an anesthesiologist, but there is another physician available.
The orders, and I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand it. So prior to 336, CRNAs had to work under a physician, correct? Not independently, but under a physician, and the orders came from the physician.
Well, that is correct that we worked under the physician. The physicians, by and large, that we worked for, whether it's a podiatrist, whether it's a surgeon, whether it's a dentist, is not necessarily trained in anesthesia care. So when we come in, we are the subject matter expert, and typically they would defer to us, but most other states, this is the way it works, is that the physician is the one that is the supervisor of the provider of the anesthesia. But the anesthesia provider is the one that has the knowledge of medications to administer, and in collaboration with the surgeon, works together to provide the anesthesia care to that patient.
Does a CRNA have their own DEA number?
Savanac. It is not a requirement in the state of Nevada. Actually, that has been discussed, but it is not a requirement yet. Other states do require it, but we do not have that requirement yet.
So I do understand that 336 came into place, but that did not change the role of a CRNA here, say Clark County or Washoe, correct? They could still practice the way they had been practicing prior to 336.
Actually, it did change the status in Washoe, Clark County in urban areas, primarily because what it did is it required the 336 covered critical access hospitals, which are in rural counties in Nevada primarily. So if you work in Clark County, you had to obtain orders from a physician anesthesiologist for any medication you administered. And as I referred, in many instances, when there is a critical event that occurs in anesthesia and the conduct of any anesthetic, you have to make a decision and administer a medication in a very short period of time. And if it requires you to seek a physician and get an order written and then processed and to be able to administer a medication, you have a very critically ill or a dead patient, and we try to avoid that. Those are bad things in anesthesia. But so when I practice in Las Vegas, I have to have a physician co-sign my orders. When I cross over the line into Nye County and I work in Pahrump, I do not have to have that. I have a physician, a collaborating physician, but they do not have to sign my orders, but they are available if needed.
I guess that's what I was getting at. I probably wasn't clear. So if you're in Clark County, you have to have a physician sign. If you're in a rural area, you do not, correct?
Savanac, that is correct, ma'am.
Okay. Was that the case in Clark County prior to 336? And is that the case in Clark County after 336?
After 336, yes. Prior to 336, it was kind of a gray area. I wasn't practicing in Clark County, but essentially the CRNAs, you work with a physician. If you had a need to provide a consultation or needed to seek a consultation, you would ask that provider and they would be able to help you, but you were able to pretty much practice on your own. A lot of this came about because the Board of Pharmacy regulations were interpreted in such a way that said, well, you've been practicing incorrectly and you need to now be under the direct supervision of a physician. And when we sought APRN status before, it unfortunately failed, but that was one thing we seek to redress, was that if we became APRNs, that the Board of Pharmacy, while still having oversight over our ability to practice, would not have restrictive rules that prevented us from practicing in those areas.
One last question. Can you provide the committee with copies of where CRNAs have APRN status in other states? And, go ahead. Okay. And also the training between what it takes to be a CRNA versus an APRN, just so we can all become familiar as a committee. Thank you.
Savanac, I do not have that with me, but we will certainly provide it to you. And I think Mr. Clark and Mr. Young are the ones that have most of that data for us. But yes, we will do that. And again, the difference between CRNA, one of the requirements for an APRN to get prescriptive authority is 2,000 hours of clinical practice, clinical training, I should say. And again, as I stated, CRNAs far exceed that when they learn to become an anesthetist. So that 2,000 hours would be easily met when we seek APRN status.
Thank you. Someone Bacchus?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I was trying to follow the questioning with my colleague because I remember this presentation vividly, and from session on AB 336. I think it was also in another bill too, so I was quickly trying to figure that out. So I appreciate that you highlighted the bill number so I could find it faster. I was looking under the wrong bill sponsor. With this, I understood before and after AB 336, one of the key factors that distinguished our bigger populated areas versus the rural areas of our state was the availability of physicians. And as it was explained during session, I believe, in Clark County or Washoe, the larger counties where you have surgical centers and hospitals, that likely you're going to have an anesthesiologist who is on staff and has maybe in pods during different surgeries, a CRNA monitoring the various surgeries. So it's accessible, orders could be issued, whatever is needed. You had that availability. And then the rural counties, I remember hearing a great story, I think of a CRNA from Winnemucca, and the fact that that just wasn't readily available. And so hence, I remember my colleagues and I putting like maybe the amendment or whatever happened to do it, that we allowed this flexibility in the rural areas just because there was no availability of physicians that could oversee it like it was in Clark and Washoe. I apologize for rambling, but I want to kind of set that up to understand where I'm coming from with my question. And I think you answered it to my colleague, but as I recall, we weren't doing anything. We were just expanding it for those rural areas, and nothing was really changing for Clark and Washoe. And so it's hard for me to understand. I mean, I don't like to hear people are leaving our state, but it seems to me if they wanted the flexibility that was given in the rules, it could do what we need. We need medical providers in the rural communities, so I'd be happy to see those folks going into that area. So I'm still trying to understand that. And then my other kind of question with this was, something simple, can CRNAs simply be APRNs? And I'm trying to figure out, is it a test? Kind of where can you get to that step to give that flexibility?
Hi, I'm Marissa Watt, W-A-T. I am a CRNA here in Carson, Tahoe, and the Carson City area in general. Just to kind of address what you have said, not only about the rural areas needing anesthesia care, our highly populated areas also need anesthesia care. And having people leave the state because they're not allowed to practice at the extent of their licensure hurts our populated communities as well. I work at Carson Tahoe occasionally with other CRNAs, and I can tell you, I actually started there about 4 years ago with another group that was a mix of anesthesiologists and CRNAs, and we worked really, really well together. And when I started there, we were running less ORs than we are now with a highly functional CRNA group and anesthesiologists as well. So we've increased care at Carson Tahoe in that 4-year time period. And also, one other area that we haven't mentioned about care are the outpatient centers in the area. I work at 2 different GI centers here in Carson and Reno area that are fully, it's a physician collaboration with just CRNAs. There are no anesthesiologists there. Those are 2 GI centers. And so this is how we are able to provide care for our communities here in the populated areas as well. To answer your question about APRN and CRNAs, I will talk about my schooling in particular. So one of the differences, if you're looking at a nurse practitioner, for example, to give you an example of an APRN status provider, you have a nurse practitioner and you have a CRNA. Typically, our schooling is about the same amount of time. The nurse practitioners, you can actually go for a program that takes you right out of nursing school. You're not required to work before you go into that program, but you can continue on to get your master's in nursing and become a practitioner. I believe they have a thesis or some kind of project at the end of their schooling in order to graduate, and then they can go out and practice even without any nursing background. For a CRNA, I can use myself as an example. I was a nurse for 8 years before I went back to school. I practiced primarily in pediatrics, but I practiced in cardiac surgery, I practiced in ICU, and also did transport as well. And I can say many of my colleagues who I went to, in my cohorts that I went to school with have done the same. Usually the minimum requirement before you can apply to a program for a CRNA is about a year of work experience, but it has to be in either intensive care, and some programs also allow for emergency care as well. You have to have experience. Once you're in school, typical programs were, when I was in school, about 3 years, 27 months to 36 months. Now we are requiring a doctorate for our actually I believe all schools in the United States now require it to be a doctorate program. So 36 months to about 40, I believe, are the length of our programs. And you get out and you do clinicals, which means you're actually practicing under the supervision of either a nurse anesthetist or an anesthesiologist pretty much after your first semester for the rest of the program. It's hands-on experience, and your hours, like we said, over 2,000 hours, it really is. You do not really just get to go home when you think your day is ended. So I felt very, very prepared to come out from my program. My program and many other programs in the United States have you go sit through 2 different types of board systems. One is an oral presentation where you answer critical questions about many different cases for hours in front of a panel just like yourselves. And then also I had 2 days of where I sat through what's called pharmacology boards to pass the pharmacology portion of my program to show that I am adequately prepared to administer meds and know the side effects and treatments for these meds.
Thank you so much for that detailed explanation. With this, and this is just maybe me being ignorant into the specialty, but the request here is not really seeking to broadly prescribe. Basically, it's looking to prescribe within the need of your specialty, which is a higher level of drugs. I get it, because you're sedating someone, but that's in essence, it's not to fully perform like what an APRN may do, open up an individual shop. This is purely for the anesthetic specialty.
Savanac, that is correct. What we are trying to do is bring our ability to practice up to the levels of other states that have similar status. They have APRN status, and that's what we seek in this state. We do we deal with, as it said in the statute, poisons, dangerous substances every day. It's what we are trained to do, what we are trained to deal with, and one of the biggest things you're trained to deal with is the side effects of any medications that we administer, and that's a very important part of our educational process. One thing I would like to add as well, and I omitted, and I apologize, was we are looking to redress the problem in the regarding the shortage of anesthesia providers in the state. And because of that, there are two nurse anesthesia programs that are opening in Las Vegas. One is at Roseman University. The other one is at UNLV. Roseman University is matriculating a class, has 21 students that actually, I believe, start this week or last week. And the UNLV program is looking to matriculate starting next year. It has been shown in other states that if somebody trains in an area, they are much more likely, if there are jobs available, to stay in that area and provide the services that are necessary in the area that they have trained. Anesthesia is no different. That if we have an educational program in this state, somebody trains in Las Vegas, the chances of them staying in Las Vegas and working there are much greater. One of the board members that left the state because he felt inadequately protected, he worked at a large hospital in Las Vegas, and one of his statements was that they had approximately 100 procedures, not necessarily surgeries, but procedures canceled every week because of a shortage of anesthesia providers. If you have qualified anesthesia providers that are APRNs and want to come to the state and practice, and they know that we have the protections of state law, they are much more willing to come here and provide those services to our clientele. We're looking for access to care in this state, and that's what we're trying to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, for the questions.
Thank you. I think Assemblyman O'Neill.
I think most of my questions have been answered, but I do have, it's only, you're saying Clark and Washoe County is where your limitation is, correct? Within Clark County, if I'm not mistaken, Mesquite has a medical facility. So even, which to me is a rural area, are you restricted up there, or do you have the freedom to practice as you said you do in Pahrump?
Savanac, Mesquite is considered a critical access hospital, so they fall under 336. Oh. And they have CRNAs there that practice under the auspices of the surgeons that they work with.
So the surgeon's there to, and if you need it, he can cut the order, or she can cut the order for the additional administration, correct? They're in
Savanac, that is correct, sir.
Okay.
Marissa Watt, just really quick, just to clarify your last question, you're talking about Mesquite?
Yeah, Mesquite, Nevada.
So that's critical access, so they don't need to cut the order.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
No, they do not.
They don't. But if down within the more urban area of Las Vegas, Clark County, they would. So is there, and you're saying there is no anesthesiologist that's also in the building or supervising any of the surgeries?
Marissa
overseeing may be the better word. I apologize. Overseeing.
Are you talking about Mesquite?
Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas, it's what we call it's a collaborative team. So it's not so much overseeing. Both an anesthesiologist is working with a nurse anesthetist, multiple nurse anesthetists, to collaborate and care for patients that are having surgery. And one more thing I just wanted to address, because I noticed that you guys are really focusing on sedation, that is one part of our job. Our other job is to keep our patients safe and healthy. We treat blood pressure, we monitor your vital signs, we care for our patients, that if something's happening or there's a misstep in surgery, we're treating that as well.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hillerby. Thank you for being willing to assist last minute. Can you explain, I think some of us, including myself, are a little confused when it comes to CRNAs, APRNs. This is definitely not my space. So if you can maybe explain an APRN role, exactly what they do, don't do as compared to a CRNA.
Sure. Thank you. Michael Hillerby on behalf of the Nevada State Board of Nursing. And thanks for that question. I could tell. And for most of us, there is probably a little misunderstanding of what the subtypes of APRNs are. We typically think of that broadly as nurse practitioner. We are already in law and regulation. You can be an advanced practice nurse or nurse practitioner. You can be a nurse midwife, and you can be a clinical nurse specialist. Those are all subsets of APRNs. And in the majority of states, CRNAs are also a subset of APRNs. I can get you a sort of mind-numbingly detailed chart from the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, which I'm happy to do afterwards, but won't do that now. That sort of lists different ways, and there's a little detail in there about how they score and compare that, and because there's slight differences among states, whether you're fully unsupervised, whether there is supervision in some limited circumstances, and I do not know enough about the specific state laws, but roughly 36 states already include, under what is called the consensus model, CRNAs as one of the subsets of APRNs. And in Nevada, as I said, we already do that with nurse practitioners, clinical nurse specialists, and nurse midwives. So they would all be generally under that umbrella. That's the model that the board essentially endorsed in the State Board of Nursing a few months ago, in saying we would support the effort from the CRNAs to be before you with the proposal that they're talking about bringing next session to go under that APRN umbrella. That would require them to meet all of the same criteria and qualifications to be considered APRNs, again, as they do in the majority of states. Hopefully that helps.
It does so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess this is more of a comment. Maybe it's a question too. So what you're really talking about is adjusting this so that the scope of practice comports with the other subsets of APRN.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Hillerby on behalf of the State Board of Nursing. I think that's pretty accurate, yes, given that their training and education is very similar. And again, you've seen the majority of states do that under, again, what's been called the consensus model. They would become under that subset, the fourth subset of APRN.
Okay, thank you. Committee? Yeah. Assemblyman O'Neill?
Thank you. We're sitting around, this bill has only been enacted for 2 years, correct? We brought it in 23. Senator Stone was actually one of the sponsors of it, if I'm not mistaken. And Mr. Clark, maybe you can answer this. What was the big opposition to this separation that caused these, that caused this issue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To you and through you to Assemblyman O'Neill. It was a very contentious battle at the end of the legislative session. That there was a lot of confusion as to what roles were going to be played in certain areas. There was the advanced anesthetist, or can't remember exactly what the name of the new column that was being added to it as well. And it really just, the confusion of the end of the session really is what obfuscated this entire issue. And so we are looking to bring this back so we can have a very detailed conversation about it in the 2025 legislative session. It is as you know, with most healthcare, it's acronym filled and it's complicated and everybody has their roles. And, you know, in the experience that I have within the healthcare system as a whole, a lot of these places, a lot of these professions within the system are looking to increase the amount of providers that we have, simply because not only are they leaving the state because they, you know, may not like the licensing model, but they're exhausted. It's a lot of work, and we need more providers. And so what we believe is with moving forward with this legislation, giving that same substatus as Mr. Hillaby discussed, it's going to be really important to maintain and bring more of those folks in and train them and have them providing the service, not just in rural, but in urban areas throughout our state. And I have to say, the encyclopedia of healthcare over here, my friend Mike Hillerby, anytime it's phone a friend, if the chair decides to do so and it's him, I'm totally on board because he knows this stuff inside and out, and I very much appreciate him being here to make the assist. I did not feel comfortable stating that the Board of Nursing had come forward simply because I'm not the lead on this particular client. Paul Young is, and I didn't have that information at my fingertips. Otherwise, I would have said that they had made that decision to endorse the concept that we're moving forward with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is it Mr. Savignac? Did I? Okay. And I always want to make sure that I'm pronouncing it correct because I think it shows lack of respect when you don't pronounce people's name the correct way. So anyway.
Savignac, and I thank you, ma'am, and I do appreciate that.
So you were in Korea?
Savignac, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. Is that
5 years.
121?
5 years at the 121 hospital.
121,
Now the
okay.
Brian Allgood Army Community Hospital in Pyeongtaek.
Okay, Pyeongtaek. I keep forgetting they moved it south. I was in, up north. So anyway, thank you for your service, MP. Yeah. Additional questions? Okay, seeing none. I'll tell you what, you all can stand up and let the seats cool off. And we are now at item number 8, I believe, public comment. Do we have anyone here in Carson City? Public comment? BPS, anyone on the phones?
Thank you, Chair. To provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, please proceed.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I was the gal who talked earlier. This has been the longest meeting I've sat through, and boy, you guys really know how to hold a meeting.
This is a short one.
There was a gentleman on the Zoom call in a yellow suit. I never caught his name. I would like to get his name.
Senator Stone.
That's Senator Stone?
That's correct.
Okay, great. All right. He and Assemblyman Mr. O'Neill kind of touched on the condo townhouse situation, and I wanted to ask a question about that. I also wanted to ask a question to Mr. Scott Kipper in regards to the broker disclosure. And then I also wanted to know if there is a public spot for any of this situation with this insurance fiasco for public volunteer. I would like to be one of those. So my first question is...
Excuse me, ma'am.
Is there a timeline?
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am. Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult because during public comment, we don't comment, nor do we answer questions. So what I would ask you to do is if you can send those via email or fax it or mail it, then we will make sure that we can address it. But during public comment, we don't answer questions or make statements.
So who do I send it to? My questions to?
You can email it to the email address. It's CL. Hold on just a moment, because we have it. It's posted on the agenda as well. CL Interim.
Okay, I'll find it on the agenda.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
That's good enough. Thank you so much. Okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
no problem. Yeah. And I probably should have stated that earlier during public comment. We don't address anything from the dais. So, BPS, anyone else on the phone?
Thank you, Chair. The line is open and working. However, there are no additional callers at this time.
Okay, a couple more seconds just in case somebody's having a problem.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, looks like we have completed all the tasks that have been assigned to us during this meeting. Reminder that the meeting in August is our work session and final meeting for the interim. And again, I'll plan to be in Carson City for that meeting. So if you're unable to travel, you can participate from our new Las Vegas committee room, which I probably will take advantage of in my meeting after our last meeting, another committee. And so with that, any comments, concerns, good of order? All right, well, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.